Chapter 639. Above the East Sea, the powerhouses of various forces stood in the air. Xianxia had been handed over to Li Mu by Miao Yunzi, and Tianjizi had not appeared from the beginning to the end. Li Mu had made many preparations in advance, but they were useless. In Xuanzong, the elders and disciples also heaved a sigh of relief. At the most critical moment, the sect had pulled back from the brink. They had not made a mistake until the end. There were so many powerhouses outside, and they were enough to wipe out the demon path. How could Xuanzong deal with them? Only Dao Qingzi's face was filled with black and white qi. His hair turned completely white one moment and then completely black the next. His aura also fluctuated between strong and weak, and it became extremely unstable. Seeing this, a first seat's expression changed drastically, and he exclaimed, "Oh no, Martial Uncle has turned into a demon." The path of cultivation was filled with all kinds of difficulties and dangers. Most cultivators would also encounter inner demons. At this moment, Dao Qingzi's appearance was clearly a sign of an inner demon's invasion. Back then it was he who had protected Qingzi and saved Xuanzong's face for a while, but it caused the sect to sink deeper into a quagmire, unable to extricate itself. Although he had never mentioned it, it must have become a sharp thorn in his heart. Now Li Mu had led many powerhouses to force Xuanzong, and the sect master had ordered the sect master to hand over Qingzi. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to him, and it completely shattered his dignity. How could Grand Elder Dao Qingzi, who valued his face so much, tolerate this so easily? In the blink of an eye, Dao Qingzi's hair turned completely black. It seemed that time had reversed on his body, and his aura also rose to a very terrifying level. When Li Mu first fought with Dao Qingzi, his cultivation was only an ordinary 7th realm cultivator, which was similar to the sect masters and grand elders of the various sections. Just now, when he saw Dao Qingzi with half black and half white hair for the second time, his aura was comparable to Ao Feng's. When his hair turned completely black, the violent aura emitted from Dao Qingzi's body had surpassed Ao Feng's, even surpassing Fu Daozi's and Zhou Xian's, and was close to Xian Ming's. Clearly he had already been possessed by the devil. 2 years ago, Li Mu had wreaked havoc in Xuanzong. He had defeated Dao Qingzi, a 7th level cultivator, in front of all the cultivators in the world. 2 years later, Li Mu was already a 7th level cultivator. He had led all the cultivators to force Xuanzong with overwhelming strength and completely destroyed Dao Qingzi's Taoist heart. To put it simply, he had a mental breakdown. The consequence of his Dao heart collapsing was that his body was now completely under the control of his inner demon. Dao Qingzi's body floated in the air. His hair was disheveled and fluttered in the wind. His body exuded an evil aura that was completely different from that of the orthodox Xianmen sect. He looked like a devil. Even Yu Ming's 3 elders, who came from the devil Dao, shuddered at the sight of Dao Qingzi. The grand elder of Xuanzong, the Taoist priest Qingzi, had completely lost his mind. His eyes were bloodshot, but his expression was calm. He looked at Li Mu without any ripples and said indifferently, "Junior, do you dare to fight with this old man again?" In front of the crowd, the ghost servant looked at Dao Qingzi with surprise. For cultivators, inner demons were a disaster, but it was also a good fortune. Most people who were invaded by inner demons would lose their minds and become monsters that only knew how to kill. However, there were also a few who could control inner demons and increase their strength greatly. Dao Qingzi was neither the former nor the latter. At this moment, his second consciousness, which was the inner demon, had taken control of his body. However, this inner demon didn't only know how to kill. Like Dao Qingzi, it had a deep obsession. Defeat Li Mu. Li Mu looked at Dao Qingzi, who seemed to have become a different person. He exuded an extreme pressure, and the battle intent in his heart surged wildly. The grudge between Fulu School and Xuanzong seemed to be between Xiaobai and Qingzi, but it was actually between him and Dao Qingzi. No matter who won or lost in today's battle, the grudge between them would be completely resolved. A powerful aura also surged out of his body. He laughed and said, "Why wouldn't I dare?" Under the gaze of all the cultivators as well as all the disciples and elders of Xuanzong, 2 streaks of light flew out from the crowd. They collided violently and each retreated hundreds of feet. Li Mu's body was as strong as a dragon's, while Dao Qingzi formed a shield around him. This was a probing move, but neither of them had the upper hand. In the next moment, Dao Qingzi opened his mouth. A white light flew out of his body and quickly turned into a silver flying sword. The flying sword transformed into thousands of sword shadows behind him. They arranged themselves into a huge fan shape and then shot toward Li Mu. At the same time, countless streaks of blue light appeared behind Li Mu. Thousands of spear shadows flew out. In the void between the two, the spear shadows and sword shadows collided. Black cracks spread out like a spider web. What a powerful spell. Even space can't withstand it. Is this a battle between seventh realms? The disciples of Xuanzong were shocked, but there was also a hint of excitement in their eyes. Compared to this battle, their usual battles were no different from children playing house. They didn't realize that many of the seventh realm cultivators present couldn't hide the shock in their hearts when they saw the space shatter. This wasn't a battle between seventh realms. Which seventh realm cultivator here could shatter the void? The short battle between Li Mu and Dao Qingzi made them realize that even though they were all in the seventh realm, the gap between them could be so huge. Among the people present, perhaps only little White and Huangji's eyes were twinkling like little stars. In the sky, it was impossible to see the silhouettes of these two people. Only the light of spells could be seen flashing. The Xian house was famous for its variety of spells. However, in terms of the number of spells that the house knew, Li Mu did not lose out to the supreme elder of the house. In this short battle, he had broadened everyone's horizons. In this extremely short period of time, Li Mu had already realized that the demonized Dao Qingzi's Dharma power was no weaker than his. Furthermore, the number of Dharma spells and divine powers that Dao Qingzi knew was also the greatest among all the opponents that Li Mu had encountered. The two of them countered each other's moves with various divine powers. Of course, if Li Mu took out the sun-shooting bow, Dao Qingzi wouldn't be his opponent. However, the sun-shooting bow was like a bug in the 10 continents. Could kill people of the same level instantly. Li Mu couldn't afford to cheat in front of so many people, and Phantom Princess and Xiao Bai were watching. Dao Qingzi wouldn't accept it either. Moreover, this was a fair battle. He didn't know how to cheat, nor did he need to. Li Mu reached out and a green light flashed in his hand. He held heaven breaking in his hand and chose to fight in close combat. Spells were his strong suit and also Dao Qingzi's strong suit. The winner couldn't be decided in a short time. Li Mu disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Dao Qingzi. The tip of his spear stabbed toward Dao Qingzi's back with lightning speed. Dao Qingzi's back was facing Li Mu. His body swayed inexplicably and Li Mu's spear missed. He shook the spear and several spear shadows appeared in the void and stabbed toward Dao Qingzi at the same time. Dao Qingzi's body swayed again and several afterimages appeared, dodging Li Mu's every attack. He slowly turned around and casually dodged Li Mu's close-range attacks. He said in a low voice, "I started cultivating when I was 5, refined my soul when I was 6, condensed my soul when I was 7 and condensed my soul when I was 8. I entered the Divine Power Realm when I was 10, the Creation Realm when I was 20, the Dongxian Realm when I was 40, and the Transcendence Realm when I was 80. I've cultivated for 100 years. How can I lose?" His words were powerful, but everyone could hear the unwillingness in them. Almost all the 7th realm cultivators present could feel the unwillingness. To be able to cultivate to this level, they were all geniuses among geniuses, who didn't have arrogance higher than the sky. However, Dao Qingzi's arrogance was completely destroyed in front of a junior who was more than 100 years younger than him. With his 7th realm cultivation, he was forced to retreat pathetically when he faced Li Mu, who was at the 5th realm. Now, Li Mu had completely caught up to him and he was completely humiliated in front of all the disciples of his sect. He desperately needed a victory. Only by defeating Li Mu could he eliminate the obsession and unwillingness in his heart. Dao Qingzi's words almost pierced the hearts of most of the cultivators present. They looked at the young figure who gave them endless pressure, and their feelings were slightly complicated. Especially the 3 elders of Yu and Ming, the 4 ghost kings, the Green Wolf King, and the supremacies of the 3 Buddhist sects of the Shan nation, who had been defeated by Li Mu. At this moment they even hoped that Dao Qingzi would win. Dao Qingzi was already the limit of their generation of cultivators. If even he was defeated by Li Mu, it meant that their generation had been surpassed by the younger generation. Their hundreds of years of hard work couldn't compare to a few years of casual cultivation. Huangji looked up and saw that the Heaven Lord of Illusion's gaze was a little strange. She snorted and asked, "Father, who do you want to win?" The Heaven Lord of Illusions immediately retracted his gaze and looked at Huan Ji. He smiled and said, "What are you asking?" "Of course I want my son-in-law to win." In the void above, the spear radiance shone brightly. Every spear that Li Mu stabbed didn't even touch the corner of Dao Qingzi's clothes. It was as if Dao Qingzi already knew where the spear would land before he stabbed. This was foresight. Seventh realm cultivators already had the ability to foresee. However, in order to foresee the attacks of cultivators of the same level, one had to cultivate the art of divination to the peak. This was what Xuanzong cultivators were good at. If they could foresee the future one step ahead of their opponents, they would naturally be in an invincible position. Unfortunately, his opponent was Li Mu. Foreseeing the future was a mystique and also a Dao technique. It could only be used by borrowing the power of heaven and earth. Through cultivating the Henku Four Sentences, he already had the ability to directly control the power of heaven and earth. As long as their cultivation wasn't too much higher than his, they wouldn't be able to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Li Mu was the master of this world. If he didn't lend the power of heaven and earth, Dao Qingzi wouldn't be able to use a single Dao technique. Li Mu calmly stabbed his spear. A trace of confusion appeared on Dao Qingzi's face. The afterimages around him disappeared. A spear pierced through his shoulder and through his entire body. If the owner of the spear wanted to, the spear could pierce through his throat, heart, dantian, or any other part of his body. He looked down at the spear that pierced through his shoulder and then slowly looked up at Li Mu. He said in a low voice, "Domain. You've already comprehended a domain. No one below the Dao integration stage can defeat you. I've lost." After saying this, his hair quickly turned from black to white. His aura also instantly fell. In the end, he was only at the transcendent initial stage. Sigh. Ao Feng sighed. Then he realized something and murmured, "He won. Why am I sighing?" He didn't know why he wasn't happy about Li Mu's victory over Dao Qingzi. However, in order to make a good impression, Ao Feng still pretended to be happy. He said loudly, "Lord Li's powers are boundless. Old fogies of Xuanzong, is there anyone else who's not happy?" The outcome of the battle between Li Mu and Dao Qingzi had been decided. The dozens of powerful beings present didn't feel any joy from the victory. Instead, they all sighed in their hearts. Dao Qingzi's defeat represented the end of an era. The era that belonged to them had come to an end. And a new era was slowly rising. Li Mu pulled out the sky-splitting spear, turned around and left. He didn't look back. He threw Qingzi back into the flask heaven dimension. He held Xiao Bai in one hand and Huan Ji in the other and disappeared from everyone's sight. The powerful beings also left. Xuanzong. Qing Xuanzi's face was pale. After a long while, he withdrew his gaze from the void. He recalled his conflict with Li Mu and a wry smile appeared on his face. At this moment, the hatred in his heart toward Li Mu suddenly disappeared without a trace. With their current identities, status and strength, he couldn't and didn't dare to hate him anymore. That figure holding the spear was deeply engraved in Qing Xuanzi's heart. It was also engraved in the hearts of all Xuanzong disciples. They would never be able to forget it. Chapter 640. Xianxia County. In the northwest direction of the county, there were a few hills in the lush mountains. These were the tombs of Xiao Bai's grandmother and her clansmen. When they left Xianxia County, Li Mu and Xiao Bai buried them with their own hands. Xiao Bai knelt in front of the tombs with tears in her eyes. She sobbed and said, "Grandma, big sister Yingying, big sister Yanyan, Xiao Bai has avenged you." Qingzi's body was lying in front of the tombs. He had committed suicide. After being abandoned by Xuanzong, he knew that he would not have a good ending, so he dispersed his soul. Li Mu flicked his finger and a fireball landed on his body. The flames rose instantly and were extinguished in an instant. A gust of wind blew and everything returned to dust. The grudges between Xiao Bai and Qingzi, as well as the grudges between Li Mu and Xuanzong, were resolved. Li Mu stayed here with Xiao Bai for a few hours before returning to his ancestral home in Xianxia County. The place that was once extremely familiar to him was now completely different. The shops on the street had changed several times, and the roads that he used to patrol had become unfamiliar. It was no longer the Xianxia County that Li Mu was familiar with. The sky was already bright. Li Mu looked at Xiao Bai, who was still sleeping soundly beside him, and a smile appeared on his face. 6 snow-white fluffy tails were hanging by the bed. She had taken her revenge and the only thing that bothered her was put down. Last night she had silently advanced in her sleep. Xiao Bai's talent was not bad. Under Li Mu's nourishment she had never lacked any cultivation resources. The medicinal power in her body had accumulated, and her dermic powers were far superior to ordinary dermic powers. She should have advanced to the 6th realm like Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, but because of the unresolved knot in her heart her cultivation had stagnated for a long time. The knot in Xiao Bai's heart had been untied, and Li Mu had also put down a huge burden in his heart. To treat the #1 sect in the world as an enemy required a great deal of courage. In order to be able to speak with Xuanzong on an equal footing one day, Li Mu had made countless efforts in the past 2 years. He had already returned the humiliation of that day in double. From now on he and Xuanzong would mind their own business. He would go his own way and they would go their own way. The glory of Xuanzong is a thing of the past. In the near future Fulu School will replace it. In the coming days, Li Mu needed to focus all of his attention on the demonic path. During this time, although the demonic path had been quiet, Li Mu could already feel the calm before the storm. When the demonic path ancestors gathered together, the calamity of the righteous path would also arrive. Deep in the South Sea Ghost Island. Aside from the people of the demon sect, no one knew the location of Ghost Island. It was not that the island was remote, but that the location of Ghost Island was not fixed. To be exact, it was a floating island floating in the South Sea. For hundreds and thousands of years, it had been wandering aimlessly. Only through the mutual sensing between the tokens of the demonic path could the location of the island be found. Xianming sat up in his sarcophagus on the tower in the center of the island. He lowered his voice and said, "Buddha, Taoism, monster, ghost, dragon tribe. For thousands of years, no one has ever united them. Even Ao Qing couldn't do it. What's so special about him?" The third ancestor slowly said, "In the past 10,000 years, he is indeed the biggest anomaly we have encountered." Xianming said regretfully, "Unfortunately he did not flatten Xuanzong. This will save us a lot of trouble in the future." The third ancestor said, "He is a smart man but Tianjizi is not that simple. Li Mu has united many forces. The situation in the Zhou continent is no longer under our control. Order all disciples to stop all actions and wait for the right opportunity." One order after another silently spread out from Ghost Island. Do. Ever since Li Mu brought everyone to Xuanzong for a stroll, the entire Zhou continent seemed to have settled down. Earlier, there were still traces of the demonic path in the various counties and southern countries of the Great Zhou. Overnight they seemed to have evaporated into thin air, disappearing without a trace. Without a doubt the forces gathered by Li Mu this time had intimidated the demonic path. Although the demonic path's 3 ancestors and Xianming were on Ghost Island, the number of core experts was far less than what Li Mu had gathered that day. After realizing the difference in strength, they did not dare to be too active on the continent. In the entire Zhou continent, the only place that was not so peaceful was the Shan nation. The conflicts between the tribes in Yanzhou were getting more and more intense. The flames of war spread to the borders of the Shan nation, resulting in a lot of bloodshed and even deaths. Although the Shan nation had sent troops to suppress the conflicts would not subside in a short time. Li Mu had been diligently cultivating in Shan Du these days. The existence of the first and second ancestors of the demonic path made him uneasy. After the dual cultivation, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were exhausted and fell asleep. Li Mu was still full of energy. His body was comparable to that of the Dragon Clan. He could only return to his study, take out 2 pieces of top-grade spiritual jade, and cultivate with them in his hands. Creak. At a certain moment the study's door suddenly opened and then slowly closed. 2 figures slipped into the room. Li Mu opened his eyes and asked, "Why aren't you sleeping? What are you doing here?" Xiao Bai blushed and said, "I want to sleep with Benefactor." Wan continued, "I want to sleep with Xiao Bai." Xiao Bai wanted to sleep with Li Mu, and Wan wanted to sleep with Xiao Bai. However, when they slept they lay on either side of Li Mu. Li Mu originally wanted to cultivate all night, but now he could only sleep with them. Li Mu could not sleep well with the fragrance of girls on both sides. It was all because of that damned Ao Qing's inheritance that his resistance to beauty was greatly reduced. If he didn't recite the clear heart art, even little by Wan couldn't resist his willpower. Li Mu restrained the impulse in his heart. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Bai's voice sounded in his ear. Benefactor. Xiao Bai leaned close to Li Mu's ear and whispered, Benefactor, I want to tell you something. Li Mu asked, What is it? Xiao Bai lowered her voice and said softly, Sister Wan Wan and I are no longer children. It was unknown if the fox race was born to do this, but after saying this, the usually innocent and cute Xiao Bai actually stuck out her small tongue and licked Li Mu's earlobe. At the same time, on the other side, Wan Wan's body also leaned over. In the past month, Li Mu had roughly experienced Ao Qing's happiness. Ever since Wan Wan and Xiao Bai Ting Exen, who had never been obedient, sneaked into his room one night. That night Li Mu learned for the first time how clingy the snake demon was. And one night when Ting Exen encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation and came to ask Li Mu for advice on cultivation problems, she happened to bump into Ting Exen, who had sneaked into Li Mu's room. The double happiness became double happiness. Finally, his body, which was as strong as a dragon's, could not take it anymore. The Tao of dual cultivation also had to be controlled. Cultivating without restrictions would instead be counterproductive. Li Mu planned to rest for a few days and return to White Cloud Mountain to see the progress of his disciples' cultivation. The spirit jades plundered from the Four Seas dragon race made Fulu School the richest sect in the cultivation world. Even if the 5 Daoist sects and the 3 Buddhist sects were added together, they were still far from White Cloud Mountain's spirit jades. This was because the Four Seas dragon race was just too rich. In the smaller continents, the resources were divided among countless factions and sections. There was not much left in each person's hands. However, the largest ocean was the dragon race's territory. There were only 100 or so dragon race members in the Four Seas. They monopolized the ocean's resources. Ordinary people could not imagine how deep their foundation was. The various sects did not lack geniuses, but their resources were extremely limited. The sect had 2 powerhouses at the peak of the Blessed Realm, but there was only one portion of resources that could allow a 5th realm cultivator to enter the 6th realm. This was the most important reason that limited the number of powerhouses in each sect. The problem Fulu School was facing now was that the sect had 2 powerhouses at the peak of the Blessed Realm, but there were 10 portions of resources that could allow a 5th realm cultivator to enter the 6th realm. The disciples who could not obtain too many resources in the past did not need to fight for them. Everyone had a share. This caused the disciples who broke through to the next realm to spring up like bamboo shoots after a rain in the past month. Although 7th realm powerhouses were not made from spirit jades, there were a few elders who were stuck at the peak of the Blessed Realm who broke through with the help of spirit jades. The number of 6th realm powerhouses in Fulu School quickly increased to 11. This number was still a little lacking compared to the current Xuanzong. However, Fulu School had already surpassed Xuanzong in terms of the number of 7th realm powerhouses. With almost endless resources, it was only a matter of time before the sect's core strength surpassed Xuanzong's. However, spirit jades could increase the sect's overall strength, but they could not increase the sect's peak combat strength. Breaking through to the 7th realm either relied on legacies or emperor chi. There were shortcuts. However, how could one break through to the 8th realm? Fulu School once had a 9th realm powerhouse, but at that time the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was not as thin as it was today. One could reach the 9th realm through normal cultivation. The same method could no longer be used today. In today's world, the only ones who knew about the cultivation method of the 8th realm were probably Xuanzong and the demonic path. However, it was clear that neither Xuanzong nor the demonic path would reveal it to Li Mu. In order to face the danger that could come at any time, Li Mu stayed at White Cloud Mountain for 3 days before heading to the Yao Nation to discuss the Tao of dual cultivation with Huan Ji. At the same time in Yanzhou, on a vast plain, 2 large tribes were fighting fiercely. Tens of thousands of soldiers had died on the battlefield. The entire plain was covered in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The land that stretched as far as the eye could see was dyed dark red by blood. Under the plain, 10,000 feet deep, a sinister man sat cross-legged. Streaks of baleful chi were attracted from the battlefield above and entered his body. The more intense the battle above was, the more baleful chi flowed into the ground. It gradually formed a black cocoon that enveloped the sinister man. Juku Continent. Juku Continent was located overseas, far away from the other continents. It did not have much interaction with the other continents. Unlike the divided Zhou continent, Juku continent had hundreds of millions of people, but only one unified country, the Ying nation. A few months ago, a sudden plague swept through the Ying kingdom. Hundreds of thousands of people had already died from the plague and the number was still increasing. The cultivators of the Ying continent had tried to save them, but no matter if it was pills or talismans, none of them had any effect on the plague. More and more people died in their homes, on the streets and everywhere else. The air above Juku continent was filled with a thick, baleful qi. Even if cultivators encountered it, they would avoid it. No one knew that at the center of this deathly aura, there was a gray figure floating in the air. His eyes had no pupils and were completely gray. An ancient book page floated above his head, and the deathly aura in the distance was attracted by the book page and slowly gathered towards this place. Chapter 641. Ghost Realm, Fengdu City. Li Mu and Illusion Princess floated in the air. The three elders of Yu and Ming, the four ghost kings and the ghost servants stood behind them, looking at a huge fog vortex in the city. Li Mu and Illusion Princess were cultivating in the demon nation when they suddenly received a message from the ghost servant that something strange had happened in Fengdu City. He immediately rushed to the ghost realm with Illusion Princess. In Fengdu City, the fog vortex gathered all the Yin Qi within 1,000 miles and sucked it into the vortex. Under the huge fog vortex, a powerful aura was brewing. It wasn't the first time Li Mu felt this aura, so he naturally knew what it meant. With the combined efforts of the entire ghost realm, He was taking the crucial step. Soon, the Empress of the Great Zhou, the Queen of 10,000 Demons, and the Master of the Ghost Realm would all become 7th Realm experts. Li Mu and the others waited for several hours. In the fog vortex, He's aura finally reached a peak. Then it broke through a certain barrier. The vortex gradually dissipated and a figure walked out. At this moment, the four ghost kings and Feng Yi, who only had a soul body, suddenly felt a sense of fear from the depths of their hearts. Facing the figure that walked out, they couldn't suppress the desire to submit in their hearts. They couldn't help but bow, and even their heads were lowered. In Fengdu City, countless ghost cultivators had the same feeling. They all knelt on the ground and kowtowed in a certain direction. Outside Fengdu City, the wandering ghosts all stopped in their tracks. Then they lined up in neat rows and slowly floated towards Fengdu City. The ghost servant knelt on one knee and said respectfully, "Congratulations, Ghost Lord." When the four ghost kings and by one saw this, they knelt down as well. Although by 2 and by 3 weren't ghost cultivators and didn't cultivate ghost Dao techniques, they were too embarrassed to remain standing when everyone had knelt down. They could only kneel down and say respectfully, "Congratulations, Ghost Lord." Suhi's voice was gentle as she said, "Rise." Then she slowly walked in front of Li Mu and looked at Illusion Princess. Illusion Princess also puffed out her chest and looked back at her, not to be outdone. Suhi was the first to speak. "I've often heard him mention it. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, the Queen of the 10,000 Demons is indeed charming." For some reason, although Illusion Princess didn't like Zhou Yi, she didn't reject the girl in front of her. She smiled and said, "Ghost Lord's sister, you're too kind. You're also very beautiful." Suhi bowed to her and said softly, "Suhi." Huanji also returned the greeting and smiled, "Huanji." Seeing the two of them complimenting each other and introducing themselves, Li Mu was momentarily stunned. Phantom Princess and the Empress were like fire and water. They were always at loggerheads with each other. However, she and Suhi got along very well. This was out of Li Mu's expectations. Originally, this time if she didn't insist on coming, Li Mu planned to go to the ghost realm alone. With her by his side, he felt uneasy. Only now did he feel relieved. Each of them had a noble status and millions of people under them. If they were all like Illusion Princess and the Empress, Li Mu would be stuck in the middle. Who knew how uncomfortable it would be? After Suhi advanced, countless wandering souls began to gather outside Fengdu City. Those were the wandering souls of the ghost realm welcoming their king. At first they were just low-level wandering souls. Gradually, 5th and 6th level wandering souls began to appear. Among the group of wandering souls, there were existences whose auras weren't weaker than the 7th level. The ghost realm was a treasure trove that hadn't been fully explored yet. Only when she advanced to the 7th level could she completely control this treasure trove. In the next few days, Li Mu accompanied Suhi and traveled through the entire ghost realm. The corpses of giant beasts that had been dead for tens of thousands of years in the ghost realm were the nests of wandering souls. The strongest wandering souls existed there. In 5 days, Li Mu and Su He found more than 10 7th-level wandering souls. Su He subdued all of them. It was also in these few days that Li Mu and Su He noticed some clues. In the ghost realm, the number of souls suddenly increased dramatically. Moreover, they were all Yin spirits that had just died. As the master of the ghost realm, Su He was the clearest about the situation in the ghost realm. Wandering souls didn't have intelligence. Ghost cultivators also had the characteristics of ghost cultivators. The number of these two wouldn't change too much in a short time. If the number of Yin spirits in a place increased dramatically in a short time, there was only one possibility. That place had many people who died in a short time. And those Yin spirits couldn't all come to the ghost realm. Therefore, the true number of people who died in the places where these Yin spirits were was far more than this number. The two of them traced back to the source and finally found the source of these Yin spirits. The conflict at the border of the Shin nation let Li Mu know that Yanzhou wasn't peaceful recently. However, after personal investigation, he found out that the entire Yanzhou had completely turned into a battlefield. This was a large-scale war. Almost all the tribes and nations in Yanzhou participated in it. Millions of Yanzhou people died in the war. The souls of the dead even drifted to the ghost realm. Before the Great Zhou was founded, the situation in Zhou province was also like this. It wasn't until Emperor Taizu founded the Great Zhou that the Zhou continent was unified. During the reigns of Emperor Wu, Emperor Wen, and the Empress, the Great Zhou was cleared of internal and external troubles. Only then did the Zhou continent achieve its current stability. If it weren't for this, the Zhou continent would be no different from Yanzhou now. Although Li Mu couldn't stand the sight of corpses lying everywhere, this situation wasn't something that could be changed by one person or one nation. The only thing he could do was to protect the Zhou continent, protect the Yao nation, and protect the ghost realm. He didn't want them to follow in Yanzhou's footsteps. After figuring out the source of the Yin spirits, Li Mu and Su He left hand in hand. As they were leaving, he vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. He turned around to take a look but still found nothing. Su He noticed Li Mu's strange behavior and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Nothing. Let's go." However, just as they were about to return to the ghost realm, Li Mu suddenly turned back. At that moment he finally realized what was wrong. Evil spirit. Wherever Li Mu and Su He went, there was no trace of evil spirit in the various battlefields in Yanzhou. This was extremely illogical. Battlefields were places of great evil. Evil spirit gathered here. Without external interference, it wouldn't dissipate even after hundreds of years. But in the various battlefields in Yanzhou, millions of people died, and there wasn't even a trace of evil spirit. There was only one possibility. The evil spirit in all the battlefields in Yanzhou had been taken away by someone. Li Mu had once sneaked into the ghost island and knew the cultivation methods of the demonic cultivators. In addition to the soul and blood essence of humans, evil spirit, death spirit, and so on were also one of their cultivation methods. Those who cultivated these paths often liked to use ancient battlefields or ancient tombs as cultivation places. These places were full of evil spirit and death spirit, which was the most suitable for them to cultivate. Soon Li Mu realized something. The inexplicable intercontinental war in Yanzhou, the deaths of millions of people and the disappearance of the evil spirit. Combined with these things, an answer was on the verge of being revealed. Someone instigated an intercontinental war in Yanzhou and used the evil spirit piled up by millions of people to cultivate. To need so much evil spirit, this person's cultivation was definitely not Zhou Xian. At the very least, he was at the peak of the transcendence realm like Xianming. He wanted to use this to break through to the 8th realm. And Yanzhou was the location of another headquarters of the demonic cultivators. Only the demonic cultivators could do such a thing. Li Mu had once wondered how the first and second ancestors of the demonic cultivators would advance to the 8th realm, but he couldn't think of an answer because he underestimated the demonic cultivators' bottom line. In order to break through, they sacrificed millions of innocent lives. They had no bottom line at all. More importantly, by the time Li Mu discovered it, it was already too late. The person behind the scenes had already gathered enough evil spirit. It was only a matter of time before he broke through, and it definitely wouldn't take too long. When that time came, how should he deal with it? Compared to the demonic cultivators, the righteous cultivators he could ally with had an advantage in number of 7th realm cultivators. They had no problem dealing with one of the 3 ancestors of the demonic cultivators. However, if there was another 8th realm cultivator, they would definitely be defeated. If there were 2 more 8th realm cultivators, even the Taoist and Buddhist sects, the Yao Kingdom, the Ghost Realm, and the Great Zhou would have no chance of winning. Li Mu could predict that if Yanzhou was like this, the situation in Juku State shouldn't be any better. Looking at the devastated land of Yanzhou, Li Mu's heart began to sink. Chapter 642. Returning to the Ghost Realm with Su He, Li Mu had a lot on his mind. He had pondered over the matter of Yanzhou for a long time. He informed everyone that from now on, they had to be extremely vigilant. They didn't need to worry about spirit jades, and they had to be prepared to use the ultra-long-distance transmission array at any time. The demonic path's relative strength was at its peak in the last 10,000 years. Once they took action, they would be unstoppable. As for himself, he had to personally go to the Juku continent to investigate. That was the last headquarters of the demonic path. If the demonic path had set up their headquarters in Yanzhou for this purpose, then the Juku continent would have already become a purgatory on Earth. With the Earth shrinking technique, Li Mu could travel through the 10 continents and 3 islands in a day. From the Ghost Realm to the Juku continent, crossing the West Sea would only take a few hours. The demonic path's spies were everywhere. If Li Mu left with great fanfare, he would not be able to hide it from them. This trip to the Juku continent was a secret investigation. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, Li Mu didn't bring anyone. He quietly left the Ghost Realm alone and headed west from the West Sea. When he arrived at the Juku continent, what Li Mu saw was a plague that had swept through the entire continent. Countless people died in the plague. The Juku continent's only large country, the Ying country, did nothing, allowing its people to be swallowed up by the plague. Li Mu knew that the Ying country had long been controlled by the demonic path. Including the royal family, all the officials in the court were part of the demonic path. This was the result they wanted to see. In the Juku continent, Li Mu also discovered something unusual. In the first city he came to, the number of people who died was in the tens of thousands. But in the entire city there wasn't much death energy. The small amount of death energy was slowly rising, floating towards the sky. Under normal circumstances, death energy would gather in low-lying areas, affecting the soil there, causing it to become barren and gradually become a place to raise corpses. The death energy didn't fall but instead rose. There must be something strange about it. Li Mu hid his figure and followed the death energy slowly rising, moving in a certain direction. Along the way, Li Mu had already discovered that death chi was rising from all over the cave-gathering continent, converging in the same direction. Until 2 hours later, a huge cloud of death chi appeared in front of Li Mu's eyes. In the entire Juku continent, hundreds of thousands of people who had died from the epidemic had gathered their death chi here, causing the originally formless death chi to become corporeal. Li Mu's eyes flashed with a golden light. His gaze pierced through the clouds of death chi, and he saw a gray-robed figure sitting cross-legged in the clouds. This person was currently absorbing the death chi in the clouds, and above his head was a simple and unadorned page. It was obvious that the death chi in the gathering cave continent was attracted by this page. Heavenly Book. When he saw the page, Li Mu was shocked. At this moment, the gray-clothed man in the death aura seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly opened his eyes and turned to look in Li Mu's direction. There were no pupils in his eyes, only a gray-white color. His entire person was filled with a strange feeling. In the next moment, the gray-clothed man's figure vanished from the clouds. When he reappeared, he was 1,000 feet away from Li Mu. He stared at Li Mu with his gray-white eyes, and shock appeared in his eyes as he said, "It's you." Li Mu wasn't curious that this person would recognize him. To possess a heavenly book and have such a cultivation, he must be a top powerhouse of the demonic path. He might even be one of the first or second ancestors. As the gray-clothed man's voice fell, he turned into a beam of light and fled into the distance. This person's understanding of Li Mu was clearly deeper than Li Mu had expected. He and the demonic path were originally like fire and water, and both of them wanted to obtain the other's heavenly book. If the demonic path ancestors saw Li Mu, they would do everything in their power to capture him, so how could they flee without fighting? The only possibility was that this person knew that he was no match for Li Mu. With the sun-shooting bow in hand, Li Mu was invincible below the 8th realm. As long as this person hadn't reached the 8th realm, he didn't have the strength to contend with Li Mu. He was clearly aware of this point, so he didn't linger in the battle. Instead he chose to flee. But how could Li Mu let him do as he wished? This person's identity was likely to be one of the demonic path ancestors, and one that hadn't advanced yet. If Lin Ming didn't take advantage of this opportunity to deal with him, there would be even greater trouble in the future. The sun-shooting bow instantly appeared in Li Mu's hand. Li Mu immediately shot out an arrow that contained 10% of his magic power. Although the sun-shooting bow was the most powerful when shooting out an arrow at full strength, unless Li Mu had the confidence to kill this person with a single arrow, he had to be extremely careful when shooting. First, he would use a less powerful arrow to exhaust himself, and at the same time quickly restore his cultivation. This way he would have a decent endurance and wouldn't fall into a state of emptiness after shooting out an arrow, becoming a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Swish. With Li Mu's current cultivation, even an arrow that only contained 10% of his magic power directly pierced through space, creating a spatial crack. It arrived behind the gray-robed person in the blink of an eye. This arrow was enough to kill a regular 7th-level cultivator. Just as the arrow was about to pierce through the back of the dark-robed person's heart, he suddenly turned around and punched out. Boom. His fist was wrapped in a deathly aura. When it collided with the arrow, the gray-robed person flew back 1,000 feet. However, the arrow directly collapsed into specks of light and vanished into the surroundings. The gray-robed person was unharmed after shattering the arrow from the sun-shooting bow with a single punch. The gray-robed person clearly realized something. He looked at Li Mu from several thousand feet away and pursed his lips. He said, "What? You don't dare to use your full strength?" Even Xian Ming would have been injured if he received Li Mu's arrow, but it didn't cause any harm to the gray-robed person. His cultivation was much stronger than Xian Ming's. He was probably only a step away from the 8th level. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "Which ancestor of the demonic way are you?" The gray-robed person smiled faintly and said, "You can call me second ancestor or you can call me Yuan Luo." Li Mu had seen Yuan Luo's name in Ao Qing's diary. He was Ao Qing's old rival from 8,000 years ago. Before Ao Qing's lifespan ended, they still couldn't determine a victor. As expected, he was one of the 2 ancestors of the demonic way that Li Mu had never met. Yuan Luo's cultivation had already reached this level. Once he completely refined the deathly aura, he would definitely step into the way integration stage. Together with the first ancestor of the demonic way would be invincible. Li Mu couldn't just watch this happen. Against such an opponent, it was useless to waste his energy. He put away the sun-shooting bow and a long spear appeared in his hand. The gray-robed person looked at the long spear in Li Mu's hand and sighed. "Ao Qing, you have indeed been an unforgettable opponent for me over the past 10,000 years. 8,000 years ago, the 2 of us couldn't determine a victor. I hope you won't disappoint me when we fight again today." As soon as he said that, a long gray spear condensed in his hand. Li Mu gripped the heaven-breaking spear tightly and said coldly, "You won't be disappointed." As soon as he said that, he and Yuan Luo disappeared and reappeared at the same time. Clang. The tips of the spears collided with an ear-piercing sound. A black spot suddenly appeared where the tips of the spears met before spreading into countless black lines. The space there shattered like a mirror. The 2 of them tacitly didn't choose to fight with their abilities. At their level of cultivation, even the most ordinary move would have the power to destroy heaven and earth after being entwined with the power of heaven and earth. In the void, the 2 of them were difficult to capture. The only thing that could be seen was the intertwining green and gray light and the shattering of space. Clang. The green and gray light collided once again. Yuan Luo was sent flying hundreds of meters away. An abnormal red color appeared on his face as he forcefully swallowed a mouthful of blood essence that was about to spit out. A trace of doubt appeared on his face before he disappeared again. Clang. After another attack, Yuan Luo was sent flying hundreds of meters away again. He looked at Li Mu, who was still standing on the same spot. The doubt on his face finally turned into shock. Something wasn't right. His true cultivation was higher than this person's. In such a head-on clash, he should have the absolute upper hand. But why was he the one who was injured every time he was sent flying? Even if this person had battle experience that wasn't inferior to his, there shouldn't be a situation where he was suppressed despite his higher cultivation. After thinking about it, Yuan Luo finally realized the reason. Every time their artifacts collided, Li Mu's spear would be entwined with the power of heaven and earth. However, the power of heaven and earth entwined around his spear would always strangely disappear when it got close to Li Mu. This was equivalent to using his powers to fight against the power of heaven and earth. How could he possibly have the upper hand? Yuan Luo was an old monster with 10,000 years of experience. In an instant he figured out the problem. He said in shock, "Domain. You're only at the 7th level. How can you control the power of a domain?" Even with his 10,000 years of experience, he couldn't hide the shock in his heart when he realized this. The power of a domain could only be controlled after one's cultivation reached the 8th level. Controlling the power of heaven and earth was the biggest difference between the 7th level and the 8th level, as well as between the Transcendence Realm and the Unification Path. In his 10,000 years of experience, Yuan Luo had never seen anyone who could control the power of a domain at the 7th level. His 10,000 years of common sense had been shattered by Li Mu today. Li Mu controlled the power of a domain. Before Yuan Luo's cultivation reached the 8th level, it was impossible for him to defeat Li Mu. No one at the 7th level could defeat Li Mu either. In a battle of techniques with the same cultivation level, Li Mu was in an invincible position right from the start. After realizing this, Yuan Luo didn't want to continue fighting and immediately teleported away. How could Li Mu let him go? He took a step forward and used ground shrink. When he appeared again, he was already in front of Yuan Luo. However, at this moment Yuan Luo suddenly raised his head, and a strange smile appeared on his face. This smile caused Li Mu to feel a chill in his heart. At this moment, Li Mu suddenly sensed that the power of space in a city in front of him had started to become extremely active. Li Mu wasn't unfamiliar with this situation. This was the appearance of an ultra-long-distance teleportation formation when it was activated. A pillar of light appeared in the center of the city. The next moment, a figure walked out of the pillar of light. It was an old man who looked like a skeleton. There didn't seem to be any flesh on his body. It was like a piece of dried human skin stuck to his bones. There were no eyes in his eye sockets, only 2 balls of ghostly fire flickering. When those 2 balls of ghostly fire looked in Li Mu's direction, Li Mu's body suddenly turned cold. It was as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Chapter 643. After the violent spatial fluctuations, the skeletal old man that appeared gave Li Mu an extremely dangerous feeling. At this moment, Li Mu recalled the first time he met Tianjizi. Without a doubt, this skeletal old man was an 8th-level powerhouse. His identity was on the verge of being revealed. The demonic path's 3rd patriarch Yu Quan. Yuan Luo looked at Li Mu and smiled wickedly. "Do you think you're the only one who knows how to teleport?" Before he could finish his sentence, Li Mu's figure had already faded and disappeared on the spot. If it was only Yuan Luo, he could still deal with him. The demonic path's 3rd patriarch Yu Quan was a true 8th-level powerhouse. Even if Li Mu shot an arrow with all his strength, he would not be his match. The gap between the 6th level and the 7th level could be crossed with the help of the sun shooting bow. However, when he encountered the 8th level Yu Quan, the 7th level, he had no other choice but to run. After using spatial contraction once, he flew towards the east at full speed. As long as he reached the West Sea, he would be like a dragon entering the water. Even Yu Quan would not be able to catch up to him. However, Li Mu soon felt a powerful aura rapidly approaching from behind. Although the demonic path's 3rd patriarch was not as fast as spatial contraction, he was still much faster than Li Mu at full speed. He quickly caught up. However, when the distance between the two was close to 10,000 feet, Li Mu took a step forward and disappeared again. Yu Quan chased after him unhurriedly without any expression on his face. It was as if Li Mu was already in his hands. Hundreds of miles ahead, Li Mu continued to run for his life. After using spatial contraction twice, the magic power in his body was almost depleted. He could only fly while reciting incantations and using spiritual jades to replenish his magic power. He did not expect to meet the demonic path's 2nd patriarch in the Gathering Cave continent, nor did he expect there to be a long-distance teleportation formation that connected to the Ghost Island. They did not hesitate to spend a huge amount of spiritual jades to teleport Yu Quan over. They used the method that Li Mu had invented on Li Mu. At present, Li Mu was still unable to contend against such an expert without risking his life. Even if he and Yu Quan fought with their lives on the line and both sides were heavily injured, there was still Yuan Luo by his side. At that time, Li Mu would definitely be an arrow at the end of its flight and would definitely not be a match for Yuan Luo at his peak. No matter what, leaving that place was definitely the best choice. He used all of his magic power to increase his speed. In front of him he could already see a blue sea. In 2 more breaths of time, Li Mu would be able to enter the Western Sea. At that time even the 3 ancestors of the demonic path would be powerless. However, when he was only a short distance away from the sea, a black lotus suddenly appeared on the shore in front of him. The evil Dao's 3rd ancestor Yu Quan stood on the black lotus and calmly stared at Li Mu. Since Tianjizi is not here, where else can you run to today? With his path blocked, Li Mu did not panic. Instead he gradually calmed down. Yu Quan's words raised doubts in his heart. He looked at Yu Quan and asked, "What Tianjizi?" Yu Quan looked at Li Mu indifferently and said, "If it wasn't for Tianjizi stopping me time and time again, do you think you would still be alive today?" Li Mu was shocked. He had no idea what Yu Quan was talking about. He only knew that the evil Dao's 3rd ancestor was an expert of the 8th level who could lead the demonic path to sweep through many sects on the Zhou continent. However, he had always been holed up in the South Sea Ghost Island and would not easily set foot on the Zhou continent because of a certain reason. He did not know that it was Tianjizi who had always been stopping Yu Quan. According to Yu Quan, he once wanted to personally attack Li Mu but was stopped by Tianjizi. What was Tianjizi's purpose for doing so? What was certain was that at that time, Li Mu and Xuanzong were like fire and water. Xuanzong's decision to cover for Qingqingzi was also made by Tianjizi. Why did he want to protect Li Mu? In the past 2 years, Xuanzong had suffered countless losses at the hands of Li Mu and had long lost his position as the #1 sect of the righteous Dao. Not long ago he led a group of experts to attack Xuanzong. Right now it was not important to figure out the reason for all this. What was important was how to escape from Yu Quan. The West Sea was not far ahead, but with Yu Quan blocking the way, this seemingly short distance was impossible to cross. At such a distance, Li Mu did not even have time to use Earth Shrink. The flames in Yu Quan's eyes kept flickering as he looked at Li Mu, trying to see if there was any panic or despair on his face. However, the result was somewhat disappointing. Li Mu's expression was indifferent and no emotions could be seen. The flames in his eyes flickered as he asked, "You're not afraid?" Li Mu asked back, "Why should I be afraid?" Yu Quan's face revealed a strange expression as he said, "You still have a trump card. I'm very curious, where does your confidence come from? Is it Zhou Xian's sun shooting bow?" The sun shooting bow was one of Li Mu's greatest trump cards. During Zhou Xian's era, many 8th level experts had fallen under the sun shooting bow. This bow was completely capable of killing Yu Quan. However, the premise was that Li Mu had Zhou Xian's cultivation at that time. With his current cultivation he could not kill or even seriously injure Yu Quan with the sun shooting bow. However, his ultimate trump card had never been the sun shooting bow. It was just that Li Mu would not use that trump card unless he was truly in a desperate situation. The stronger his magic power, the greater the backlash from using that trump card. When Li Mu was in the lower and middle realms he could still barely withstand it. However, now that his cultivation had reached the 7th level, the terrifying backlash was enough to destroy Li Mu's body and soul on the spot. When he tried to let the Empress possess him, even the Empress was frightened. The Empress's cultivation at that time was about the same as Li Mu's now. Finally, Yu Quan seemed to have run out of patience and said, "Hand over the heavenly book and join the sage sect. Then we can let bygones be bygones. Tianjizi is not here, so you won't be as lucky as before." "Oh, how did you know that I'm not here today?" Just as Yu Quan's voice fell, an old voice suddenly came from the shore behind him. This voice sounded familiar to Li Mu, and in Yu Quan's heart, it was unforgettable. He suddenly turned his head and looked at a reef by the sea. On one of the reefs an old man was sitting cross-legged. The old man's back was facing Li Mu and Yu Quan, and he was holding a fishing rod in his hand. It was unknown how long he had been sitting there. Li Mu's attention was all on Yu Quan just now, so he did not notice that place. Now that he thought about it, he was shocked to find that the old man seemed to have been fishing there before he fled here. Looking at the fish basket next to him, there were already dozens of small fish in it. Based on the speed of ordinary people's fishing, it was not difficult to see that he had been here before Li Mu came to the Juku continent. He knew that he would come to the Juku continent before Li Mu and knew that he would be hunted down by Yu Quan. So he came here in advance to wait for him. Was this the strongest person in Xuanzong? The old man put down the fishing rod and released all the fish in the basket into the sea. Then he turned around, revealing a face that Li Mu was no stranger to. This face was full of wrinkles and brown spots, and there were only a few strands of hair on his head. He was so old that he looked like he would step into a grave the next moment. But the appearance of such an old man made Yu Quan's face turn solemn, then angry. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Old ghost Tianjizi, don't tell me you don't have your own matters to attend to?" Tianjizi smiled and said, "This old man is just an idle person who should have died long ago. How could I have my own matters to attend to? I just got tired of fishing in the East Sea, so I came to the West Sea to fish. What do you want to care about this?" Although Tianjizi said so, who would travel tens of thousands of miles from the East Sea to the West Sea just to fish? Yu Quan's face was gloomy and terrifying as he asked, "Tianjizi, this man has a grudge against your Xuanzong for humiliating your sect. Not long ago he led those people to force Xuanzong. Don't tell me you forgot about that?" Tianjizi sighed and said, "I'm old and my memory isn't good. Is there such a thing?" Faced with Tianjizi, who was playing dumb, Yu Quan didn't say anything else. At this time, more than 10 rays of light appeared in the distant sky. Yuan Luo led more than 10 people and quickly appeared behind Yu Quan. Those people all exuded the aura of the 7th level, but compared to Li Mu and Tianjizi's righteous aura, it seemed a little evil. Tianjizi's gaze swept across the crowd, and a look of reminiscence appeared on his face. He said, "Fellow Daoist Yuan Luo, long time no see." When Yuan Luo saw Tianjizi, veins popped out on his forehead. He said coldly, "Indeed, long time no see. If it weren't for you back then, I would have already stepped into the 8th level. Why would I need to reincarnate and cultivate again?" Yuan Luo's words were filled with endless resentment. At this moment, the wind and clouds in the sky reversed, and huge waves surged on the surface of the sea. Yuan Luo and Yu Quan's group of more than 10 people faced off against Li Mu and Tianjizi. The atmosphere was tense to the extreme. Chapter 644. The situation at the West Sea was in a stalemate. Even though Yu Quan and Yuan Luo had the advantage in numbers, Li Mu and Tianjizi were not to be trifled with. The existence of the sun-shooting bow in particular made Yu Quan and Yuan Luo wary. The sun-shooting bow's power was limited in Li Mu's hands. However, if it was controlled by Tianjizi, even Yu Quan would not dare to take it head-on. There was a 90% chance that he would die on the spot if Tianjizi used all his strength. If that arrow was shot at Yuan Luo, who had yet to advance, would definitely die. 10,000 years ago they had dozens of senior and junior brothers. Now there were only 4 of them left. The death of any one of them was something they could not accept. The two sides faced each other from a distance, and the surroundings were deathly silent. After a while, Tianjizi spoke first. He looked at Yu Quan and Yuan Luo and said, "The fish in the West Sea are too small. It's boring to fish. If there's nothing else, we'll go back first." Yu Quan and Yuan Luo did not speak. Tianjizi looked at Li Mu with a smile and said, "Little friend Li Mu, let's go." After saying that, he turned and flew to the east. Li Mu glanced at the demonic path crowd and followed behind Tianjizi, leaving together with him. Beside Yuan Luo, a black-clothed man asked in confusion, "Sirs, are we just going to let them go?" Yuan Luo and Yu Quan ignored him. They knew very well that the moment Tianjizi appeared, they would not be able to do anything to Li Mu today. As one of the most difficult enemies of the sage sect in the past 10,000 years, Tianjizi's reputation was not undeserved. Yu Quan spat out a mouthful of turbid air and said, "There's no need to rush to deal with Tianjizi. Senior brother Xian Tian has already returned to Ghost Island. When he finishes his seclusion, Tianjizi will no longer be a threat. Senior brother Yuan Luo, come back with me." Yuan Luo nodded and ordered the people behind him, "Gather all the elders above the 6th realm and return to the South Sea with me. The day I come out of seclusion will be the day I sweep through the 10 continents. At this time above the West Sea." Li Mu looked at Tianjizi's hunched back and asked, "Why did you save me?" Tianjizi smiled and said, "This old man already said that I only came to the Western Sea to fish and happened to run into you. Moreover, do you really need this old man to save you? Even if I don't do anything, the victor between you and Nether Spring is still between 40% and 60%. I'm afraid even Nether Spring himself doesn't know about this." Li Mu's pupils shrank. Tianjizi's divination skills were more powerful than he had imagined. Not only was he able to predict Li Mu's movements and the dangers he was about to encounter, he was even able to predict the outcome of the battle between him and Yu Quan. What else did he not know? Li Mu pondered for a moment and asked, Senior Tianjizi, there's no need to show off your divination skills. Junior wants to know why you saved me again and again. Tianjizi was silent for a while before he turned to look at him and said, In the future the 10 continents can exist without me, but it can't exist without you. Li Mu knew that Tianjizi must have predicted something, so he asked, Why? Tianjizi shook his head and said, This old man only predicted that the catastrophe of the 10 continents would come, and you are the only hope of the 10 continents. Anyone can die in the 10 continents, but you can't. Li Mu pondered again and asked, When did you predict this? Tianjizi said, From the first time you stepped into Xuanzong. Li Mu was stunned for a moment, then he said angrily, Then why did you allow Dao Qingzi to cover for Qing Qingzi and deliberately let Xuanzong become enemies with Fulu School? Li Mu didn't understand. Since Tianjizi had already predicted this, why didn't he tell him directly? Instead he let him and Xuanzong become enemies. In 2 years Xuanzong was reduced to such a state. What was he planning? Tianjizi looked at Li Mu and asked, If Xuanzong had handed over Qing Qingzi little friend Li Mu, what would you have done in these 2 years? Li Mu blurted out, I. Just as he said this word, Li Mu froze in place. He didn't know how to answer Tianjizi's question for a moment. Of course Tianjizi knew himself well. If Xuanzong had handed over Qing Qingzi, Xiaobai would have been avenged, and the knot in her heart would have been untied. Perhaps she would have taken the initiative to give herself to him 2 years ago. In the beginning, Li Mu would have fallen into the gentle embrace of the little fox. Without the goal of avenging her, Li Mu naturally wouldn't have joined forces with the 5 Daoist sects. Perhaps to this day he would still be Fulu School's hands-off manager. He wouldn't have cultivated desperately, thought of ways to improve the strength of the sect, and joined forces with the forces that could be joined. He would have had enough time to talk about love with the Empress. Their relationship would have been 1 step closer than it was now, or even 2 or 3 steps closer. He would often wander around the divine capital, the demon nation, and Mount Baiyun. Where would he find the time to cultivate? Immersed in the gentle embrace for 2 years, let alone transcend, he probably wouldn't even have the motivation to break through Zhou Xian. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi in shock and asked, This is your goal? Tianjizi asked, What else could it be? Other than hatred, what else could make you do all this today? Li Mu thought about it and realized that there really wasn't anything. Xiaobai was Li Mu's darling. Li Mu didn't want her to suffer any grievances, let alone the hatred of the extermination of his clan. If Tianjizi had told him that the catastrophe of the 10 continents was coming and he was the only savior, Li Mu would most likely have thought that he had dementia. To think that he had even calculated this. This old fellow really knew him well. Li Mu's face turned red and he felt extremely awkward. He immediately changed the topic and said, What catastrophe are you talking about? Is it the rise of the demon path? Tianjizi shook his head and said, I can only see a trace of the heavenly secrets. I can't see the specifics. In recent days, millions of people had died in Yenzhou and Juku continent. Corpses were everywhere and the people were in a terrible situation. This was already considered the catastrophe of the 10 continents. If Yuan Luo and the demon path's first ancestor used this opportunity to advance, how could the righteous path's only Tianjizi, who was at the 8th level, contend against them? At that time the 10 continents would completely fall into the hands of the demon path. This matter corresponded to the catastrophe that Tianjizi had predicted. Li Mu heaved a long sigh of relief and continued to ask, What should I do? Tianjizi shook his head and said, I don't know. You have to ask yourself about this matter. Li Mu didn't know what he should do at this moment. He had already done what he could. Combining all the forces that could be combined to resist the demon path was all he could do. However, this still didn't change the fact that the demon path was about to have 3 8th level cultivators. Among the demon path's 3rd ancestor, Tianjizi could deal with one, and Li Mu could barely stop the other. However, what about the last one? After advancing to the 8th level, one would be able to expand one's domain. Those with lower cultivation than him would not be able to mobilize the power of heaven and earth within a certain range. For cultivators, if they couldn't mobilize the power of heaven and earth, they could only use about 50% of their full strength. Even if 10 people joined forces, they might not be a match for the last 8th-level demon path's first ancestor. Of course, if dozens of people ganged up on him and didn't borrow the power of heaven and earth, they would be able to fight against the 8th-level demon path's first ancestor with just their own magic power. They might even be able to kill the 8th-level demon path's first ancestor. However, at least half of the dozens of people ganging up on him would be killed. This was something that Li Mu absolutely could not accept. Moreover, the demon path didn't only have the 3rd ancestor. The number of 7th-level cultivators in the 3 great altars added together might not be as many as Li Mu's alliance, but it wouldn't be much less. If everyone joined forces to deal with Yu Quan, who would deal with the demon path's first ancestor? Li Mu could also give the sun-shooting bow to Tianjizi. This seemed like a good idea, but the problem was that Tianjizi could kill an 8th-level demon path's first ancestor at the cost of exhausting all his magic power. At that time, the remaining 2 8th-level demon path's first ancestor could easily kill him. This was nothing more than a 1-for-1 exchange between Tianjizi and the demon path. Even if Li Mu was willing, Tianjizi probably wouldn't be willing. At present, the only way was to kill the first ancestor and second ancestor of the demon path before they broke through to the 7th level. This way, finding the Ghost Island would become the most important thing. The Ghost Island was located in the depths of the sea and was difficult to find. Moreover, there were countless demon paths' first ancestor guarding it. Apart from Tianjizi, anyone who went to the Ghost Island would be sending themselves to their deaths. Unless the one searching for the Ghost Island wasn't a human. Half a day later at White Cloud Mountain, Ao Feng heard Li Mu's words and shook his head repeatedly. He firmly said, "No, the lives of our dragon race are also lives. What's the difference between finding the demon path's lair and rushing to our deaths?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "When you find the Ghost Island, I'll extend your lifespan." Ao Feng's expression gradually turned solemn. He righteously said, "Leave this matter to us. Our dragon race is also a peace-loving race. The demon path's evil deeds are unforgivable. We and the demon path are absolutely irreconcilable." Chapter 645. The Ghost Island was located in the depths of the South Sea, and only the dragon race had the ability to take the risk to search for it. Even if they were discovered, as long as they escaped into the deep sea, even Yu Quan would feel powerless. For tens of thousands of years, the resource-rich ocean had been occupied by the dragon race because of their unique racial talent. Even if the humans and demons coveted it, they couldn't compete with the dragon race in the deep sea. This was only one of the arrangements. After all, Li Mu couldn't pin all his hopes on the dragon race to find the other 2 ancestors of the demonic path before they advanced. He had to make more comprehensive arrangements. It would be great if he could advance to the 8th realm as soon as possible. Although the 8th realm was a whole new world and couldn't be compared to the 7th realm, and he couldn't defeat several people alone, he still had the confidence to fight 1 against 2. At that time, together with Tianjizi, they could compete with the 3 ancestors of the demonic path. Xian Ming could be handed over to the Empress. After restraining Xian Ming, no one in the demonic path would be a match for Zhou Xian, Fu Daozi and the Ghost Servant. Together with Ao Feng and the others, their strength would be enough to form an overwhelming advantage. However, the Dao integration realm wasn't something that Li Mu could advance just because he wanted to. The first and second ancestors of the demonic path were originally at the peak of the 7th realm. In order to break through to the 8th realm, they slaughtered tens of millions of lives in Yanzhou and Juku continent. Their advancement was made with the lives of tens of millions of people. Li Mu wouldn't and couldn't do that. Among the thousands of techniques in the cultivation world, there was no faster shortcut than the demonic path. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi and asked, "Senior Tianjizi, how did you advance back then?" Tianjizi said, "I'm ashamed to say that all the spirit crystals of Xuanzong's ancestors were wasted on me. The most important part of the inheritance of the 6 sects was the cultivation crystals condensed by the ancestors before their lifespans were exhausted. Apart from Fu Daozi, all the 7th realm experts of the 6 sects advanced through this method. No wonder there were so few 7th realm experts in Xuanzong. It turned out that they used all their spirit crystals to create an 8th realm expert. Otherwise, the Xian sect would have more powerhouses in the Nirvana realm than the other 5 sects combined. But at the same time, they wouldn't have any powerhouses of the 8th level protecting them. Perhaps they would have been destroyed by the demonic path a long time ago. Li Mu was unable to replicate Tianjizi's path of advancement. Each sect had a limited amount of spiritual crystals. Up until now, almost all of them had been used up. Even if the 6 sects gave their last spiritual crystals to Li Mu, it was still far from enough. Li Mu suddenly had an idea. The mantra of Tao Te Ching as his last trump card was more powerful than the sun-shooting bow. With his current cultivation, he still could not use it. If he borrowed the mana of Tianjizi, what would happen? As long as his primordial spirit temporarily possessed Li Mu would be able to start the experiment. He looked back at Divine Predictor, but before he could speak, Divine Predictor pinched his fingers and said, "Although I don't know what you're going to say, this old man has calculated that what you're going to do next has a 90% chance of destroying my body and soul. This method absolutely cannot work." Since Divine Predictor had said so, Li Mu could only give up. It seemed that even if Li Mu advanced to the 8th realm one day, he still could not uncover the secrets of Tao Te Ching. However, Li Mu had a faint premonition in his heart that the backlash of the power of heaven and earth was not without a limit. When he was strong enough to withstand this huge power of heaven and earth, he would completely master these mantras. At that time, the mystery of Tao Te Ching would be completely revealed before his eyes. Li Mu no longer bothered about this matter and said to Divine Predictor, "Senior Divine Predictor, can you let me take a look at the Heavenly Book of Xuanzong?" Already knowing Divine Predictor's intentions, Li Mu did not stand on ceremony with him. Divine Predictor stretched out his hand and a simple page appeared. It was the last page of the Heavenly Book of the 6 sections. Divine Predictor said, "Since the Heavenly Book of the 5 sects is already in your hands, you can also take this page of the Heavenly Book." Li Mu separated his divine sense and sank his consciousness into the Heavenly Book. The contents of the Heavenly Book of the 6 sects were similar. In the Heavenly Book of Xuanzong, there were also the figures of giant beasts and a group of ancient cultivators using mysterious techniques to fight against their enemies. Li Mu swept through those techniques, focusing all his attention on the divination. This was the supreme technique of Xuanzong. When one cultivated to the highest level, one could foresee the future. Even Divine Predictor only understood the surface. Li Mu pinched his fingers with one hand. Divine Predictor reminded, "Anyone who tries to pry into the secrets of heaven will be bitten by the secrets of heaven." Countless seniors of Xuanzong were proficient in this Tao, but they all fell before their lifespan was exhausted. "You have to be careful." Li Mu nodded and said, "I know." With the rise of the demonic path and the impending calamity of the continent, there were many other things that needed to be prepared besides cultivating diligently. The many forces of the continent could no longer be like before, scattered everywhere like a plate of loose sand. It would be extremely easy for the demonic path to take them down one by one. Although there was a long-distance teleportation formation, it consumed a large amount of spiritual jades every time it was activated. It was extremely inconvenient. It was better to gather all the experts in one place so that they could be mobilized in the fastest and most timely manner. After discussing with Divine Predictor, Li Mu chose a small coastal country in the south. The battle that was about to happen in the future would be an earth-shattering one. Several 8th-level cultivators and dozens of 7th-level cultivators would participate in the battle. It would be an apocalyptic scene. It was best for the battlefield to be in a remote and uninhabited place. The people of the small country in the south would gradually move inland. The experts of the 6 sects of Taoism, the 4 sects of Buddhism, the Yao Nation, the Ghost Realm, the Yong Nation, and the Great Zhou would establish a line of defense on the shores of the South Sea. That was the first line of defense and also the last line of defense. If they won, the 10 continents would be at peace. If they lost, the 10 continents would be completely invaded by the demonic path. The divine capital. The people who knew nothing were happy. The battle between the righteous and demonic paths had nothing to do with them. They only knew that their lives were stable now, and the Great Zhou was growing stronger day by day. They would have a long period of good days in the future. Not many of the officials and nobles in the imperial court knew the inside story. Only a few people knew that the deans and vice-deans of the 4 major academies had already left the divine capital. Her Majesty the Empress also hadn't attended court for many days. Above the clouds above the divine capital, 2 figures that were hard to see with the naked eye shuttled through the clouds. The light of spells illuminated the white clouds in colors. No matter how Li Mu and the Empress cultivated, it was impossible for them to break through their cultivation level in a short period of time. He could only impart everything that he knew to them. Even if the Empress couldn't display the full might of those mystical powers and Dao techniques like Li Mu, she could still improve a part of her abilities. At a certain moment, Li Mu's figure appeared above the clouds. He looked at the Empress and said, "That's enough. Your Majesty should have no opponent below the 8th level." Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu and said, "So you've been going easy on me." When Li Mu had just entered the 7th level, he hadn't comprehended the power of domains. It was indeed difficult for him to defeat the Empress. But when he learned how to use domains, the Empress was no longer his opponent. However, Li Mu had never used the power of domains on her. Li Mu held her hand and walked on the clouds. He smiled and said, "If I don't go easy on your Majesty, should I go easy on others?" Zhou Yi stopped and leaned on Li Mu's shoulder. She asked softly, "Can we win?" Li Mu held her slender waist and said with certainty, "We definitely can." This sentence was only used by Li Mu to comfort the Empress. Whether they could win against the ancestors of the demonic path or not, Li Mu wasn't completely sure. Tianjizi could predict that the calamity was coming. He could predict that Li Mu had a chance of survival, but he couldn't predict what method he would use to break it. Li Mu also didn't know. There was no way he could deal with that extra 8th level powerhouse. After sending the Empress back to the palace, Li Mu flew back into the clouds. He closed his eyes and chanted a spell. He formed a seal with one hand and used a divination technique. But all he saw was darkness. At the same time, a massive power of heaven and earth emerged from the void. Li Mu grunted and an abnormal flush appeared on his face. He had already been lightly injured. Those who divined into the secrets of the heavens would definitely suffer a backlash. But Li Mu didn't give up. He formed another seal and all he saw was darkness. This darkness had no boundary. It stretched up and down endlessly left and right. The entire world was filled with a kind of extreme darkness. He divined a great battle with the demonic path. This indicated that in the current situation, they had no hope of winning. Just as Li Mu was about to give up, a faint light suddenly appeared in a certain direction in the darkness. This light was very dim. Li Mu almost missed it. But it was indeed the only light in the endless darkness. Li Mu opened his eyes and looked in a certain direction. That was the direction of the light in the darkness. That glimmer of light represented hope. And that direction was Yingzhou. Li Mu didn't delay. He walked all the way to the northeast. Soon, a vast land appeared in front of him. This was Yingzhou, a barren land adjacent to the Zhou continent. Mo Li and the tens of thousands of soldiers of the Great Zhou would be conducting research on mechanisms here. But Li Mu wasn't here to find them. He went all the way into Yingzhou. After passing through countless places filled with smoke and miasma, he finally arrived at a mountain range. This mountain range stretched endlessly, but there was no poisonous miasma. The reason was that there wasn't a single blade of grass in this mountain range. There were no poisonous plants or plants that could produce miasma. The entire mountain range was filled with a thick corpse aura. Li Mu floated in the air. He looked around and soon saw a familiar figure. Xianming also didn't expect that Li Mu would come here. His expression changed drastically. He said in surprise, "What are you doing here?" When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Xianming and Li Mu met here. The atmosphere instantly became tense. A battle was about to break out. Suddenly, a deep voice came from the mountain range. "It's you." A sturdy figure flew out from a mountain. This figure carried a thick corpse aura. Li Mu was shocked. This person's aura easily overshadowed his and Xianming's. It was comparable to Yu Quan and Tianjizi's. This was actually an expert of the 8th realm. Li Mu looked at the figure that was gradually becoming clearer. He lowered his voice and said, "Emperor Bai." Chapter 646. Li Mu had not seen the White Emperor demonic corpse ever since they parted ways at the Demon Emperor cave abode. He had even forgotten about its existence. Emperor Bai was an expert from the demon clan 3,000 years ago. His cultivation had reached the 9th realm. At that time 9th realm experts were extremely rare. In the entire 10 continents they could be counted with one hand. It was a pity that such an expert was still limited by his lifespan. However, Emperor Bai did not face death calmly. Before he died, he ordered all his subordinates to be buried with him. He also sacrificed their corpses and waited for a few thousand years for someone to break into the Demon Emperor cave abode and absorb their blood essence to be revived. Later on his plan succeeded. However, he was persuaded by Li Mu's glib tongue. He gave up his memories of Emperor Bai and even the Demon Emperor cave abode. He then disappeared without a trace. Who would have thought that he would come to Yingzhou and reach the 8th level without anyone noticing? Li Mu was not surprised by Baidi's demonic corpse's cultivation level. Li Mu had refined 2 level 7 demonic corpses from his 2 level 8 demonic corpses. Baidi's cultivation level had reached level 9, and his physical body was extremely strong. As long as he had time, it was only a matter of time before his physical body recovered to level 8. The moment he saw Emperor Bai, Li Mu finally understood what that slim chance of survival represented. If he could recruit Emperor Bai, then even if the 3 ancestors of the demonic way gathered, they would not have any advantage. This was because Li Mu and the others only lacked a peak 8th realm expert. Xianming probably came here with the same goal as Li Mu. Although he did not know how she knew about Emperor Bai's whereabouts, if Emperor Bai was recruited by the demonic way, they would have no chance at all. Li Mu put these thoughts aside. He clasped his hands together and said to the White Emperor demonic corpse, "Senior, long time no see." Xianming and Li Mu knew each other's thoughts. After Li Mu spoke, Xianming immediately said, "Daoist White Emperor, this person has a clever mouth and is good at deceiving people. No matter what he says, don't believe him." Since Emperor Bai had appeared, Demon Dao had been paying attention to him and searching for him everywhere. This time his 2 senior brothers were in seclusion. Xianming had come here specially. It would be best if he could recruit Emperor Bai. If he couldn't, he had to persuade him not to be recruited by Li Mu. Unexpectedly, as soon as she arrived, she met Li Mu. If White Emperor was deceived by Li Mu in addition to Tianjizi, it would be a great threat to them. She could not sit back and watch such a thing happen. Li Mu glanced at Xianming and said to Emperor Bai, "Predecessor Emperor Bai, listen to her. What is she talking about? What is she talking about? You're a monster. She looks down on the monster tribe, which means she looks down on you. You can't listen to her." When Emperor Bai heard this, he looked at Xianming and gradually frowned. Xianming did not expect Li Mu's angle to be so tricky. His expression changed and he immediately explained, "I didn't mean that. Daoist White Emperor, you should be able to feel that our auras are of the same origin. We are the same kind. This person is from the alien tribe. He is not one of us. His heart must be different. Don't be deceived by him." Li Mu, of course, would not let Xianming do as he wished. He quickly said, "Her chest is so big. Both of us are flat. We are the same kind." Emperor Bai looked at Li Mu and then at Xianming. He found that Xianming's aura was very similar to his. On the other hand, Li Mu's aura made him faintly disgusted. However, in terms of chest, both of them were indeed different from the other person. Hesitation appeared on his face. He couldn't tell which of the 2 people in front of him was his friend. Li Mu glared at Xianming. The advantage he had just established was almost completely reversed by her. After all, Emperor Bai was a corpse cultivator. Xianming was also a corpse cultivator. As an outsider, he did not have the advantage to compete with Xianming. Fortunately, the demonic corpse Bai in front of them was not the real Emperor Bai. Emperor Bai was the former king of the demon tribe. He was cunning and astute. His way of doing things was also demonic. It was very likely that he would stand on the side of demonic. The demonic corpse Bai in front of them did not have Emperor Bai's memory. He was a new individual. He had the strength of an 8th realm and the intelligence of an 8-year-old. Li Mu had been fighting with Su Miao in the ghost domain all day long. He was very experienced in dealing with this kind of spiritual corpse. With the intelligence of the demonic corpse Bai, he obviously did not know who to listen to. He scanned the 2 of them and asked, "What are you doing here?" Xianming said impatiently, "Daoist White Emperor, it has been 3,000 years. My senior brother and I would like to invite you to the Ghost Island for a chat." Li Mu interrupted, "Senior, the Emperor Bai she is talking about is the demonic Emperor Bai, not you. If you go to the demonic territory, perhaps your intelligence will be erased again and you will become their puppet. Demonic Dao likes to do this kind of thing the most. The Ghost Island she is talking about has 3 existences as strong as you. Senior, please reconsider." Xianming glared at Li Mu and quickly explained, "Daoist White Emperor, don't listen to her words. You are a guest of the Ghost Island. We will not do such things to you." Li Mu glanced at her and said to Emperor Bai, "A woman's mouth is a liar. You can't believe her words. When you go to the Ghost Island, your life and death will be in their hands. You will not be able to control it anymore. Xianming was furious. Li Mu. Li Mu squinted at her. So? At this moment, Emperor Bai looked at the two of them and said, "You two can go. I will stay here. I will not go anywhere." Before Xianming could speak, Li Mu sighed and said, "Senior, you are not experienced enough. You are too naive. With the way the demonic Dao does things, they will destroy what they can't get. If you let her go, I am afraid she will lead the experts of the demonic Dao to annihilate you soon." Hearing this, the demonic corpse Bai's eyes moved slowly. Although he had just gained sentience not long ago, he was not stupid. Li Mu's words made him a little wary. Seeing this, Xianming immediately formed a seal with one hand and said, "I can swear that we will never do such a thing." Li Mu used his specialty and fanned the flames, saying, "The oath of the demonic Dao cannot be trusted. Senior Emperor Bai, why don't you come with me? We only have 1/8 realm cultivator here. They will not harm you. At the very least, even if we want to harm you, you can leave at any time. But if you go to them, you will face 3 experts of the same level. If something happens, I am afraid you will not have much power to fight back." Under Li Muxiao's persuasion, the White Emperor seemed to have been moved. With his current intelligence, it was hard for him to understand some complicated things. Unknowingly, his mind was being led by Li Mu. Xianming did not expect that Li Mu would interfere in the successful recruitment. With just a few words, he persuaded Emperor Bai. Seeing that the situation was gradually getting out of control, she immediately gave up trying to rope him in. She turned into a white light and was about to leave. It was not easy to meet Xianming alone. How could Li Mu let her go so easily? Almost at the next moment, when Xianming was about to move, he reminded Emperor Bai, "Senior, you can't let her go like this." After being led by Li Mu, Emperor Bai subconsciously believed that the demonic Dao wanted to harm him. Now that he saw Xianming escape, he thought that she was going to ask for help. His body shook and an invisible force spread out. Xianming's body suddenly stopped strangely in the void. This was the power of a 8th realm expert's domain. If Li Mu had comprehended it earlier, Xianming would have fallen into his hands. Li Mu did not waste this opportunity. A golden light flew out from his hand. The golden light turned into a huge golden talisman in the air and landed on Xianming's body. This was the talisman that Fu Daozi had drawn. Xianming's body was restrained and she could not escape. After the talisman entered her body, even her spiritual power was sealed. Li Mu then tied her up tightly with the holy binding chains. He cupped his fists at Emperor Bai and said, "Senior, we can't stay here for long. Let's leave quickly." After what had happened just now, Emperor Bai and Li Mu had established a preliminary trust. He nodded and quickly left with Li Mu. Li Mu headed south and was filled with emotions. If he had not persuaded the demonic corpse to give up Emperor Bai's memory that day, he would have buried a huge hidden danger today. It was much easier to persuade an 8-year-old demonic corpse than to persuade Emperor Bai. It was because of the cause that day that the consequences of today were born. On the shore of the South Sea, in the palace of a small country in the south, 2 streamers landed from afar. A few figures immediately flew over from afar. Fu Daozi and the supreme elders of the other sects were shocked when they saw Emperor Bai standing beside Li Mu. They were already in the 7th realm, but the muscular man beside Li Mu was still as majestic as a mountain in their eyes. After Li Mu introduced them, they hurriedly cupped their fists and bowed. "Greetings, Senior Emperor Bai." Although he had followed Li Mu back, Emperor Bai did not completely trust him. Seeing everyone's attitude, Emperor Bai let down his guard slightly. He sensed a few powerful demonic auras and 10 corpse auras. These auras made him feel very close. Li Mu gave the Heaven Lord of Illusions a look and said, "Father-in-law, Senior Emperor Bai used to be the emperor of the demon race. I will let the demon race take care of him." The Heaven Lord of Illusions was very meticulous. He understood Li Mu's intention with just a look. The war with the demon race was imminent. If they could keep Emperor Bai here, it would undoubtedly be a strong ally. As for how to keep Emperor Bai here, it would depend on the demon race. After the Heaven Lord of Illusions left with Emperor Bai, Li Mu did not stay idle. He contacted Qin Shi with a sound transmission Dharma artifact and said, "Come to the South Sea and bring along a few female corpses that you have refined. Remember to make sure that they are good-looking." After arranging this, he sent a message to Tianjizi and then came to a palace. Li Mu waved his hand and released Xianming, who had his magic power sealed. Tianjizi looked at Xianming and said with a hint of emotion, Daoist Xianming, we meet again. Xianming glanced at Tianjizi and Li Mu indifferently. Then she pursed her lips and asked, "Do you think you can stop my 3 senior brothers just because you found Emperor Bai?" Li Mu looked at her indifferently and said, "Yuan Luo and Xian Tian used the lives of millions of people in the Ku continent and Yenzhou continent to advance to the Dao integration realm. What do you have to be proud of?" Xianming did not show any compassion when she mentioned the lives of millions of people. Her eyes were cold and emotionless. She said coldly, "So what if we kill everyone in the 10 continents? You owe us this." Chapter 647. Xianming's righteous tone made Li Mu angry. He asked, "In the past 10,000 years, you diabolism have been stirring up storms in the continent to get the tomes of arcane and the secret of immortality. Hundreds of millions of innocent people have died in your hands. Who owes whom?" Xianming's face was still cold. She gritted her teeth and said, "The descendants of those people deserved to die." Li Mu looked at Xianming, who had a trace of madness on her face. After taking a deep breath, he gradually calmed down and asked, "Who are those people you are talking about?" Xianming sneered and said, "Those who call themselves the righteous sections. Your ancestors are a group of selfish, treacherous and shameless people." Li Mu moved a chair and sat in front of Xianming. He continued to ask, "What happened 10,000 years ago?" Through the tomes of arcane, Li Mu could see part of the truth of what happened 10,000 years ago. However, it was just fragments. Xianming and the others were the ones who had experienced what happened 10,000 years ago. They must know more than Li Mu. Facing Li Mu's question, Xianming closed her eyes. It seemed that she didn't want to talk more about what happened 10,000 years ago. Li Mu looked at her and sneered. He said, "When it comes to treachery, who is more treacherous than you, diabolism?" In the past, the strong warriors of the righteous and the diabolism fought against the strange beasts together. Many ancestors sacrificed themselves in exchange for the stability of the 10 continents. Look at what you have done in the past 10,000 years. Are you worthy of your ancestors? When the strange beasts still wreaked havoc in the 10 continents, the righteous and the diabolism had a common enemy. In order to fight against the strange beasts, the diabolism had also made great sacrifices. Li Mu saw this from the tomes of arcane. After Li Mu finished speaking, Xianming seemed to be stimulated. He suddenly opened his eyes and said angrily, "Bullsh *T. In order to protect the people of the 10 continents, 99% of the 100,000 disciples of the sage sect died on the battlefield of the strange beasts. Many precursors of the sage sect did not hesitate to explode themselves and die together with the beasts. However, what did they get in return? Those people opened the gate of heaven, found the Taoyuan, destroyed the road to heaven and enjoyed their immortality. They only left the strange beasts for us." Being stimulated by Li Mu, Xianming revealed more information. Li Mu knew that in the past, because the people of the demonic path were no match for the strange beasts, they could only self-detonate and perish together with them. However, the heavenly gate, paradise, and path to heaven that the calculator of Xianming mentioned were all unfamiliar terms to him. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi and found that he wasn't surprised. Li Mu asked in a low voice, "You know about this?" Tianjizi nodded, then shook his head and said, "No one knows the truth of 10,000 years ago. This is only their guess." At that time, the Taoist sect had not yet appeared. The ancestors of Xuanzong only found some clues through some ancient books. Li Mu asked, "What clues?" Tianjizi was silent for a moment and said, "More than 10,000 years ago, the ancient cultivators were all looking for a place called the Taoyuan. It was said that in the Taoyuan one could ignore the laws of heaven and earth. After cultivating to a certain level, one could obtain immortality. As long as they found the gate of heaven, they could find the road to heaven and enter the Taoyuan. At that time, the strange beasts were still wreaking havoc in the 10 continents. As the most powerful sect in the 10 continents, the sage sect led the ancient cultivators to fight against the strange beasts." Li Mu continued to ask, "What happened after that?" Tianjizi let out a long sigh and said, "Some of the ancient cultivators found the gate of heaven overseas and then disappeared completely, never to be seen again. The 6 sects of the Taoist sect inherited the orthodoxy of their descendants. The gate of heaven." Li Mu thought of the illusory door that appeared after the tomes of arcane were gathered. But at that time, the tomes of arcane should have been scattered in the 10 continents and could not be gathered. The so-called gate of heaven should not be the door he saw. Tianjizi's words indirectly confirmed that Xian Ming was not lying. Combined with the picture that Li Mu saw from the tomes of Arcane, he had sorted out the complete picture in his mind. In the ancient times, the strange beasts and the human race coexisted in the 10 continents. At that time, the Sage sect was the most powerful sect in the 10 continents with 100,000 disciples. Even now there was no sect that could compare with it. The Sage sect at that time was not the demon sect of today. Although their cultivation methods were strange, they did not kill people. In order to exterminate the strange beasts, the Sage sect paid a painful price. Those ancient cultivators found the gate of heaven, which should have been a good thing for everyone to embark on the path to immortality. But after they stepped into the Taoyuan, they destroyed the path to heaven, leaving the Sage sect to fight against the strange beasts alone. In the end, all the experts of the Sage sect fell in the war with the strange beasts, leaving only Xian Ming and the others, who were the ancestors of the Devil sect. In the past 10,000 years, they held the hatred for the descendants of the ancient cultivators and stirred up conflicts on the continent. They made the Sage sect, which originally belonged to the righteous camp, completely become the demon sect. On the one hand, they were seeking revenge. On the other hand, they were looking for the tomes of Arcane, wanting to use the tomes of Arcane to reopen the gate of heaven. Li Mu still had one thing that he did not understand. He asked, why did they destroy the path to heaven? Xian Ming's chest rose and fell. She gritted her teeth and said, because the spiritual qi is limited. It will become thinner with time. The more cultivators there are, the faster the spiritual qi will become thinner. It will become harder and harder for experts to appear. When the spiritual qi in the 10 continents is exhausted, there will be no more cultivators. They don't want too many people to go to the Taoyuan, and they don't want people to compete with them for the spiritual qi in the Taoyuan. Li Mu was silent for a long time before he said, this is not a reason for you to kill other innocent creatures. Even if the ancient cultivators were wrong in the past 10,000 years, the innocent people who died in their hands were not wrong. The ancestors of the Devil sect had witnessed the destruction of their sect and the betrayal of their allies. Their hearts had long been occupied by hatred. Hatred made them act in an extreme way, and it also created the evil reputation of the Devil sect for 10,000 years. Li Mu did not ask Xian Ming any more questions. He sent her back to the teapot space. Tianjizi clasped his hands behind his back and said slowly, she is right about one thing. The spiritual qi is limited. One day the spiritual qi in the 10 continents will be exhausted. At that time, there will be no more cultivators and the demon clan will not be able to gain intelligence. The 10 continents will become a dead land, Li Mu murmured, just like the teapot space that has lost its master. After losing its master, the spiritual qi in the teapot space would slowly dissipate. 3,000 years after Emperor Bai's death, his teapot space became a dead land. After Li Mu obtained it, it reconnected with the outside world and began to regain its vitality. Tianjizi nodded. Then he said self-deprecatingly, perhaps the 10 continents is also someone else's teapot space and we are just living creatures in the teapot space. This idea was a little too bold, but it was not impossible. If the teapot space was big enough, the people living in it would not realize that they were in the teapot space. However, to be able to own such a big teapot space, his cultivation must have surpassed the 9th realm. He must have reached a level that Li Mu could not imagine. There were too many secrets about the 10 continents. Li Mu did not forget that there was an unbreakable layer of astral wind above them. In the demon clan's heavenly book, there was also a scene of a 9th realm heavenly demon banging his head against the sky. Since ancient times, there must have been more than one person who had doubts about this. The living creatures of the various races had never stopped searching for the answer to this question. Li Mu stretched out his hand. More than 10 pages of heavenly books appeared in his palm. The illusory door appeared again. At this time the door was clearer than before. Tianjizi stared at the door and asked, is this the gate of heaven? Li Mu shook his head and said, I don't know. Before gathering all 24 pages of the heavenly book, no one knew what was behind this door. Would it be the legendary paradise that could allow one to break through the limit of one's lifespan and enjoy eternal life? Li Mu suddenly thought of the sky pilfering array. Li Mu knew the principle of the heavenly secret talisman very well. It extended one's lifespan for a short period of time by concealing the secrets of the heavens. However, the sky pilfering array that could extend one's lifespan by 60 years was still a mystery. At this moment Li Mu suddenly had a guess. Could the whirlpool above the array and the strange power that appeared from the whirlpool have come from the paradise? Chapter 648. After kidnapping Emperor Bai, Li Mu felt more confident. Even if a war broke out in the future, the three experts of diabolism would be restrained. An 8th realm diabolism ancestor would not be able to participate in the battle of the 7th realm. In a war involving several 8th realm experts and dozens of Nirvana realm experts, Dongxuan's cultivation would not be of much use. Most of the first seats of the various sects stayed in their sects and did not come. Li Mu asked Ting Xian and Yin Xian to bring Lu Hanyan, Li Qing Wanwan, and Xiao Bai to the East Sea Dragon Palace. Diabolism's actions were unpredictable. They could not do anything to Li Mu and might attack his family before the war. The Dragon Palace of the Four Seas in the Deep Sea was a place that diabolism could not reach. Li Mu's body entered the flask space again and unlocked the immortal binding lock on Xianming. Her spiritual power had been sealed. In front of Li Mu, she was no different from an ordinary girl. Li Mu looked at her and said, "Where is the token of the Ghost Island?" Xianming looked at him indifferently and sneered, "Do you think I will give it to you?" Li Mu glanced at Xianming. Experts of this level would have their own flask space. Normally they would store their items in the flask space. Unless she opened it herself, no one could enter. According to Xianming's character, forcing her would not work. Li Mu thought for a while and said, "Your purpose is to find the tomes of arcane, reopen the gate of heaven, enter the Taoyuan and obtain eternal life. This is what we want. Since we have the same purpose, why do we have to fight to the death? Isn't it better to gather all the tomes of arcane together and enter the Taoyuan together?" In 10,000 years, diabolism had done many evil things on the continent. Not long ago, millions of people had died in their hands. Although Li Mu also wanted to eradicate them and return peace to the 10 continents, the truth was that diabolism was not a pushover. The result of the war between the righteous and diabolism would only be a lose-lose situation. Even with Emperor Bai's help, the chances of victory between the two forces were only 50 to 50. Perhaps the righteous path would win, or perhaps the demonic path would win, but either result would bring about a calamity that would engulf the 10 continents. Countless experts would fall, and even if the righteous path won, their vitality would be greatly damaged. They would need hundreds or thousands of years to recover, and their inheritances might even be severed. If possible, Li Mu still hoped to avoid this war. Xianming didn't say anything, but she wasn't silent. Li Mu could see that she was thinking. After a long time, Xianming asked, "How many pages do you have?" Li Mu, "Including the ones we took from Ghost Island, 14 pages. Then he asked, "How many pages do you have?" Xianming contemplated for a while and then said, 7 pages. There were 24 pages in the complete heavenly book. Li Mu had 14 pages and the demonic path had 7 pages. They were only 3 pages away from the complete heavenly book to uncover the secret behind the door. Both the demonic path and Li Mu had the same purpose. Li Mu looked at Xianming, who was thinking, and said, "What do you think? I have twice as many heavenly books as you have. If we cooperate, you won't lose out. You will even gain an advantage." Xianming was tempted. But at this moment, the scene of the destruction of the sage sect 10,000 years ago flashed in front of her eyes again. Her parents, master and fellow disciples had all died in the war with the demonic beasts. In exchange, they had been betrayed by the righteous path. Pain flashed in her eyes and her eyes gradually became sharp. She said coldly, "So what if you have 14 pages of the tomes of arcane? Soon we will capture you and all the tomes of arcane will be ours. You insidious and cunning people, the sage sect will never cooperate with you." Xianming was so stubborn. Li Mu didn't say much to her. He tied her up again with the holy binding chains and then left. The ancestors of the demonic path obviously didn't just want to reopen the gate of heaven. They also wanted to take revenge and destroy all the orthodoxies of the righteous path. This also almost cut off the possibility of cooperation with them. It seemed that the possibility of this war being avoided was very small. Li Mu sighed and suddenly looked up into the distance. In the distant sky, a white dragon came with the wind. 3 figures stood at the front and the back of the dragon's head. They were the Empress, Ali and Mr. Mei. Li Mu turned into a stream of light and instantly landed on Ting Xian's body. Zhou Yi coughed softly, indicating that there were many outsiders here. When there were outsiders, she always kept a distance from Li Mu. Even though everyone in the world knew about his relationship with the Empress, except for Ali, Mr. May and a few others, no one had ever seen it with their own eyes. Li Mu didn't keep a distance from her this time. Instead, he naturally held her hand. The catastrophe of the 10 continents was coming. If they didn't take this opportunity to show off their love in front of everyone, they might not have another chance in the future. At this time, several figures flew up from the palace of this small country. When they saw the Empress, they all saluted, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Although she was still very young as the Empress of the Great Zhou, her strength was also one of the top in the continent. The leaders of the 6 sects, the highest elders and the experts from all sides still maintained a high level of respect in front of her. Zhou Yi and Li Mu held hands tightly. She tilted her head slightly and glanced at Li Mu. She knew what he was thinking. Shyness flashed in her eyes, but her face showed the majesty of the Empress. She said, "Seniors, please don't stand on ceremony." Li Mu smiled at the crowd and said, "I'll take Her Majesty to rest." After that, he held the Empress's hand and flew down with Mr. May and Ali to a palace that had been prepared for her. In the sky, Fu Daozi stroked his white beard and said, "My disciple really brings honor to the sect." The Empress of the Great Zhou dynasty was rich and beautiful, and she also had strength that no one present could compare to. For a cultivator with such status and strength to be willing to fall in love with someone like an ordinary woman, it was an unbelievable thing. However, when they thought about it carefully, it seemed that only a woman like her, who had surpassed the older generation at such a young age, was worthy of him. In other words, they were a good match for each other. While the crowd was whispering, several rainbows appeared in the distant sky again. 4 extremely beautiful women were carrying a palanquin. Behind them were countless figures. Sensing the demonic aura that swept over, someone said, "The Empress of 10,000 demons is also here." As the ruler of the demon country, the Empress of 10,000 demons also had the most distinguished status on the continent. Therefore, the crowd decided not to go back. When the palanquin flew closer, a graceful figure walked out of the palanquin. The crowd bowed again, "Greetings, Empress of 10,000 demons." Huanji revealed a charming smile and said, "Seniors, you're welcome." After she finished speaking, her eyes scanned the surroundings. It was obvious that she was looking for someone. Somewhere in the palace below, Li Mu hadn't spoken much with the Empress when he sensed Huanji's aura coming from outside. He looked at the Empress. Zhou Yi glanced at him indifferently and said, "Go." Huanji waited outside for a while. Then another figure flew out of the palace. She took the initiative to reach out her hand to Li Mu as if she was declaring her sovereignty. Li Mu held her hand and smiled at the crowd. He said, I'll bring the Empress to rest. Everyone please." Fu Daozi was proud when he saw the 2 figures disappear. He puffed out his chest and laughed, "It's a waste of youth if he's not romantic. Other than my disciple, who else has such ability? I heard that the Empress of 10,000 demons and martial nephew Ling Jizi are Dao companions. I didn't expect the rumors to be true. If not, why would the demon country ally with the Great Zhou? It's said that the master of the ghost realm is also one of his Dao companions. Could it be true?" While everyone was discussing in low voices, a black fog suddenly floated over from the northwest. The yin qi in the fog was oppressive, and after it dissipated, a dozen or so figures could be seen within it. Most of the auras were at the 7th realm. Moreover, they were all soul bodies. Different from the ghost cultivators, they stood behind the 2 figures with wooden expressions like the most loyal guards. The 2 women at the front looked exactly the same. One of them emitted the aura of the 7th realm. When the 4 ghost kings saw this, they immediately flew forward and knelt on one knee. They said respectfully, "Greetings, Ghost Lord." This was the first time everyone saw the mysterious master of the ghost realm. Just as they were about to go forward and greet her, a familiar light flew up from below. It was Li Mu. When Su Miao saw Li Mu, she immediately flew up and held Li Mu's arm tightly with one hand. She reached out with the other hand and said, "Candy." After spending some time together, Li Mu's position in her heart was second only to Su He. Li Mu suspected that this was because he was the only one in the ghost realm who would play with her and often give her candy. On the way back, Li Mu notified Empress Huanji and Su He. He didn't expect them to come together, so he was a little busy. He looked at the strange gazes of the people around him and hid his embarrassment with a smile. He said, "I'll take good care of the Ghost Lord." Everyone disperse. Chapter 649. After dispersing the crowd, Li Mu was in a dilemma. Others only knew that having the Empress of the Great Zhou, the Queen of Demons and the Master of the Ghost Realm seemed to be a wonderful thing, but who could truly understand his dilemma? Right now the Empress, Phantom Princess and Su He were in different palaces. Where should Li Mu go first and where should he go next? This was a big problem. Now that he was with Su He, should he go find the Empress or Phantom Princess first? Su Miao was still pestering Li Mu and did not know that Li Mu was full of worries. Su He glanced at him and said, I want to see what you're going to do now. Su He would not fight with the Empress or Phantom Princess, but the two of them had accumulated hatred for a long time. As long as they met, they would be at each other's throats. This was what gave Li Mu the most headache. If he went to Phantom Princess and then the Empress would be unhappy. If he went to the Empress and then Phantom Princess would be unhappy. After careful consideration, Li Mu decided not to go to anyone. He went to his residence and sat cross-legged. In order to prepare for the battle that could happen at any time, he adjusted his state to the peak. Li Mu had not adjusted for long when the space beside him fluctuated. The Empress figure appeared out of thin air. She seemed unhappy and frowned at Li Mu. Li Mu got up and walked over. He played dumb and asked, Your Majesty, why are you here? Zhou Yi glanced at him and said unhappily, If you don't come to me, can't I come to you? Li Mu sighed and said, I didn't mean that. It's just that the war is about to start. The demonic path is strong. I have to adjust my magic power to the peak to have the power to fight the demonic path's ancestors. As expected, Li Mu changed the topic. Zhou Yi looked at him with a bit of heartache and said, This is a common tribulation of the 10 continents. You don't have to put all the burden on yourself, it will be very tiring. The greater the power, the greater the responsibility. Although Li Mu's Tao of divination was not as good as Tianjizi's, he could faintly sense that the 10 continents were about to face a great catastrophe. Everyone must go all out in order to have a chance of victory. Li Mu held the Empress's hand and said, With you two by my side, I'm not tired at all. Outside the door, 2 figures who had been waiting for a long time came in. Phantom Princess looked at Zhou Yi and said, Let me say this first. This time there are more important things. I don't want to argue with you. Zhou Yi glanced at her and said indifferently, Do you think I want to quarrel with you? The two looked at each other. There seemed to be an invisible force colliding in the void, but it quickly disappeared. They stood on the left and right of Li Mu and didn't look at each other. Li Mu was already very happy with this situation. Then he told them some of the details of the plan and said, When the time comes, Phantom Princess, you have to follow Sister Su. Don't be too far away from her. Her Majesty will be with me. Hearing Li Mu's arrangement, Phantom Princess slightly pouted but didn't say anything. With her power, even if she followed Li Mu, she wouldn't be able to help him. The only thing she could do was to protect herself and not distract Li Mu. The Empress and Phantom Princess temporarily stopped fighting. In the next few days, Li Mu had been trying his best to increase their power. In Xuanzong's heavenly book there were endless transformations. Li Mu and the others went into seclusion to comprehend. Until a certain moment he felt the aura of the Black Dragon race. Ao Feng and the others had been trying their best to find the Ghost Island. Li Mu put away the heavenly book and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was standing on a reef on the coast of the South Sea. At the end of his line of sight, a line of water was spreading over here. Soon it reached the seaside. Including Ao Feng, the 4 elders of the Black Dragon race were pulling a floating island. The line of water was caused by the island moving in the water. Li Mu asked, Is there news of the Ghost Island? Ao Feng looked at the floating island on the sea and asked, Is this the island? Li Mu looked at the island and then looked at Ao Feng and asked, What do you think? The Ghost Island was the headquarters of the demonic path. A large number of demonic path experts gathered on it. Even if the dragon race of the 4 seas gathered together, they would not be able to bring the Ghost Island back. Although this island was also a strange floating island, it clearly had nothing to do with the Ghost Island. Ao Feng revealed a difficult expression and said, We searched the entire South Sea and only found this floating island that can move on its own. We brought it back for you. Li Mu waved his hand and said, Forget it, there is no need to search anymore. Tell them to come back. From now on you all will stay here. You don't need to go anywhere. Before the first ancestor and second ancestor of the demonic path advanced, the strength of the Ghost Island was at its weakest. It would not be easily discovered. If the dragon race of the four seas were to spread out, they would lose a large portion of their combat strength. He could not let them continue to go out. Li Mu looked at the huge island that Ao Feng and the others brought back. This island was no different from the other islands. It was lush with vegetation and some small animals. The only strange thing was that this island was completely floating on the surface of the sea. This was indeed very similar to the Ghost Island. Li Mu originally thought that the Ghost Island was floating on the surface of the sea by the demonic path. Now it seemed that this was not the case. This was because there was no trace of a formation on this island. A normal island should be a piece of land that extended from the bottom of the sea. It was impossible for it to float on the surface of the sea just by virtue of buoyancy. It was rumored that the three celestial mountains that hid the secret of eternal life floated on the surface of the sea and moved around. However, this island was nothing special except for its ability to float. No matter how he looked at it, it had nothing to do with the celestial mountains. Li Mu used the earth escape technique to enter the interior of the island. He still did not find anything strange. The world was vast and there were all sorts of strange things. If it were any other time, he might carefully study the mysteries of this island. However, now was clearly not the time. Li Mu withdrew his attention from the island. Ao Feng sighed and said, "Why don't we go and look for it again?" If they found the Ghost Island, their entire clan's lifespan would increase by 60 years. To the Black Dragon clan this was of great significance. He was not willing to give it up. Just as Ao Feng's voice fell, Li Mu's body trembled slightly. He looked towards the depths of the South Sea and said in a low voice, "No need." Ao Feng still wanted to fight for it. Suddenly he seemed to have sensed something. He turned his head and looked towards the depths of the sea. In the depths of the South Sea, a black line was spreading towards them. In the distance the weather suddenly changed. Endless dark clouds rolled and rolled, and the calm surface of the sea became turbulent. Huge waves dozens of feet high surged towards the shore. At the peak of the giant waves an island was floating. Countless black-clothed figures stood on the island. These black-clothed figures emitted powerful auras that swept towards the shore. Li Mu's gaze traversed hundreds of miles and saw three figures standing at the very front of the island. He saw Yuquan Yuanluo and a sinister youth standing in the middle of them. Compared to those demonic cultivators, the three of them did not have any auras. They were just like mortals. At this moment, Li Mu only had eyes for the three of them. Almost at the same time, dozens of streaks of light streaked across the sky behind Li Mu. They covered the sky and covered the earth as they flew towards the shore and landed beside Li Mu. The aura exuded by the dozens of seventh realm powerhouses also created a wall of waves that swept forward. In the end, the two walls of water collided. After an earth-shattering sound, they all turned into mist. The surface of the sea temporarily returned to calm. The Ghost Island also stopped moving and quietly floated 10 miles away from the shore. In an instant the world fell silent. However, this silence only lasted for a moment. Boom. In the next moment the sea within 10 miles suddenly exploded. The seawater evaporated instantly, revealing the rocks at the bottom of the sea as well as the corpses of countless fish, prawns and aquatic creatures. Then the seawater flowed backwards and filled the sea again. Apart from the surging waves, it was as if nothing had happened just now. However, an extremely oppressive atmosphere quickly spread in all directions. In the sky, countless birds flew away. In the sea, countless aquatic creatures fled towards the depths of the sea. On land, all sorts of snakes, insects, rats and ants were also frantically fleeing from this place. The apocalyptic scene spread rapidly with this place as the center. Chapter 650. The shore of the South Sea fell into a deathly silence. Yuquan's words broke the silence. His eyes were fixed on Emperor Bai, who was in front of the crowd. "Emperor Bai, you still chose to be our enemy." Emperor Bai did not speak. When he saw Yuquan and the other two, he knew that Li Mu did not lie to him. On the other side, there were three existences whose cultivations were not weaker than his. If he also stood on the opposite side, the balance between the two sides would be completely broken, and the demonic path would undoubtedly rule the 10 continents. At that time his situation would no longer be under his control. The three ancestors of the demonic Dao floated above the Ghost Island, and their auras swept over. Tianjizi and Emperor Bai stood in front of the crowd and also released their auras to resist. However, the two of them could not compare to the three. Xian Tian, Yuan Luo, and Yuquan did not move, but Emperor Bai and Tianjizi each took 2 steps back. Yuquan looked at Tianjizi and a trace of mockery appeared on his old face. Tianjizi, this time can you still protect him? Tianjizi leisurely exhaled and sighed. Xian Tian, Yuan Luo, Yuquan, do you really want the 10 continents to fall into the catastrophe of 10,000 years ago? Even now, when the matter of 10,000 years ago was mentioned, Yuquan's face still showed deep hatred. His eyes were sharp and he said word by word, "You are not worthy to mention the catastrophe of 10,000 years ago to me. 10,000 years ago, if the sage sect had not been destroyed, the current master of the 10 continents would have been the strange beasts, not you." Tianjizi looked at him and said slowly, "The sage sect once made an indelible contribution to the 10 continents, but in the past 10,000 years, the living beings of the 10 continents who died in your hands were innocent. You passed down the memory generation after generation just to vent your anger." At this time, Yuquan looked at him strangely and said, "We passed down the memory generation after generation and so did you. In this regard you are no different from us. Am I right, Lord Tianji?" Tianjizi lowered his head and fell into silence. At the same time, the supreme elders and sect masters of the 6 Daoist sects, especially the experts of Xuanzong, looked at Tianjizi with puzzled eyes. Some of them had no idea what was going on. They couldn't understand the conversation between Tianjizi and Yuquan. There were also some who were in the know who looked at Tianjizi in shock. Talisman Dozi and the other 2 supreme elders of the Talisman sect exchanged glances and muttered. "If I'm not wrong, the Daoist name of the founding ancestor of the dark sect seems to be Lord Divination." Li Mu's eyes also flashed with bewilderment. According to Youchuan's words, could it be that Tianjizi was also an old monster from 10,000 years ago? Was he also using demonic path methods to pass down memories from generation to generation? Facing Youchuan's question, Tianjizi slowly raised his head and didn't deny it. "If you are venting your anger for the destruction of the sacred sect, then 10,000 years have passed and billions of lives in the 10 continents have died at your hands. Is your resentment still not extinguished?" Extinguished? The fire in Youchuan's eyes flickered violently as he said mockingly, 10,000 years ago my Dao companion and children died at the hands of strange beasts. My master, martial uncles and martial uncles self-detonated their bodies and souls, perishing together with the strange beasts. In order to eradicate the strange beasts, my sect had less than 100 disciples. What did you do? Your father and your righteous people found the Taoyuan, cut off the path to heaven and left the strange beasts to us. What qualifications do you have to criticize us? Hearing Yuquan's words, the experts behind Li Mu all wore blank looks on their faces. They couldn't understand what the 3 ancestors of the demonic path were talking about, but they could guess that it contained a great secret. Strange beasts, the sacred sect, the righteous path. What kind of secret was there 10,000 years ago? Everyone pondered in silence, and the scene fell into dead silence again. Amidst the dead silence on the demonic island, a gray figure flew towards Tianjizi. Yuan Luo's voice resounded through the entire sea region. "Tianjizi, I lost to you 200 years ago. Let's fight again today to settle the karma of the past." As Yuan Luo flew out, a sword of death aura condensed in the void in front of him. The sword was gray in color and was 10,000 feet long. It slashed towards Tianjizi's position. As the sword fell, a 10,000 feet long crack appeared in the void. From afar it looked like the sky was being cut open. The sword quickly arrived and slashed towards Tianjizi. At the same time it slashed towards Li Mu, who was beside Tianjizi, and the dozens of Transcendent Realm experts behind him. This sword caused fear to appear on the faces of the Buddhist, Daoist, Monster Kings, Ghost Kings and even the Black Dragon clan. The power of this sword was beyond their understanding. Even Li Mu had to admit that the gap between him and the 8th level was still very large. If he faced Yuan Luo's sword head-on, he probably wouldn't be able to take it. Li Mu wasn't even sure how many times the Dao Bell would be able to take such a sword. Among everyone, the only ones who could remain calm were Emperor Bai and Tianjizi. In the face of Yuan Luo's shocking sword, Tianjizi waved his sleeves and an item flew out. It was a simple and unadorned tortoise shell. On the tortoise shell, there were natural patterns that intertwined like strange runes. After being thrown out by Tianjizi, the runes on the tortoise shell flashed and rapidly enlarged, covering everyone's heads. When the tortoise shell and the giant sword collided, Time seemed to stop for a moment. In the next moment, a gap appeared on the tortoise shell and it flew back. However, the giant gray sword also turned into countless gray light spots and slowly disappeared. The clash between the two 8th-level experts seemed to be unusually calm and didn't cause any ripples. However, in the next moment, the countless mountains behind them suddenly collapsed from the waist up. Smoke and dust flew everywhere. Below their feet, the ground caved in and they couldn't see the end of it. The seawater of the South Sea rolled back dozens of miles, revealing the dry seabed, and this was merely the aftermath of the clash between the 8th-level experts. "I'll leave this to you." Tianjizi looked back at Li Mu and turned into a beam of light that flew toward Yuan Luo. His voice resounded through the sky. "If you want to fight, I'll fight." As soon as he said that, Yuan Luo and Tianjizi flew toward the depths of the South Sea at the same time. The two of them were too powerful. Even the aftermath of the battle was too much for the 7th-level experts to withstand. With their speed, they instantly disappeared from everyone's sight. Everyone, including Li Mu, could only feel the intense fluctuations of the power of heaven and earth from afar. Other than that, they knew nothing about the battle. At this moment, the evil-looking youth of the 3 ancestors of the demonic Dao slowly stepped forward. This person was the first ancestor of the demonic Dao, Xianxia. Although he was the first ancestor, his ascension time was too short. Among the 3 ancestors of the demonic Dao, Yuquan was the strongest. As Xianxia stepped forward, Emperor Bai also stepped forward in silence. Xianxia looked at Emperor Bai calmly and asked, "Brother Emperor Bai, are you going to stop me?" Emperor Bai's demonic corpse looked back at the demonic beasts who had always been respectful to him. Then he thought of the spirit corpses that had accompanied him for the past few days. He looked at Xianxia and spoke for the first time. "I am not Emperor Bai." He opened his arms and his body expanded. His eyes turned crimson red and sharp nails grew out of his fingers. 2 fangs protruded from the corners of his mouth. An extremely hot aura spread out from his body. Other than Li Mu, the righteous Dao experts behind him all retreated. A substantial evil aura surged out of Xianxia's body, making him look like the god of death. Looking at his figure, everyone could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Xianxia looked at Emperor Bai and his body shot toward the 9 heavens. Emperor Bai roared and immediately followed. The 4 8th-level experts had a tacit understanding not to fight here. No one knew what was happening above the 9 heavens. Everyone's gaze was focused on the 3rd ancestor of the demonic Dao, Yuquan. After Tianjizi, Emperor Bai, Xianxia, and Yuan Luo left, he was the only level 8 expert present. The power of Yuan Luo's sword was still deeply engraved in everyone's minds and could not be erased. The power of a Dao integration realm expert was like an insurmountable mountain. Who could defeat him? Most likely, a casual divine ability from him would cause many of the people present to perish. At this moment, everyone looked at Li Mu. He was good at creating miracles. He was their only hope. Yuquan looked at Li Mu calmly and said, "5th junior sister is in your hands, right? Let her out and hand over the heavenly book. Then you can die with dignity." In the crowd, the Empress Zhou Xian, Guanyu, and Fu Daozi stepped forward and stood behind Li Mu. Li Mu raised his hand, indicating that they didn't need to do anything. Then he looked at Yuquan and said with a smile, "Xian Ming is in my hands. If you have the ability, come and save him yourself." Yuquan stared at Li Mu but didn't make a move. Instead, he asked in confusion, "What makes you think that a 7th-level junior like you can fight against me?" Li Mu said indifferently, "You'll know soon." He didn't take out the sun-shooting bow or the sky-splitting spear. This was because he knew that in the face of absolute power, these treasures weren't enough to turn the situation around. He slowly flew toward Yuquan and stopped somewhere in the void. Yuquan looked at him as if he was looking at a trapped beast. At this moment, Li Mu slowly stretched out his hand and made a strange hand seal. At this moment, Yuquan acutely sensed that the power of heaven and earth had changed abnormally. At the same time, in the depths of the South Sea, Yuan Luo stopped fighting with Tianjizi. He suddenly turned around and said in shock, "What is this?" Above the 9 heavens, Xianxia temporarily separated from Bai Di. He looked down and said in surprise, "Who is it?" To be able to mobilize such a huge amount of power of heaven and earth. Above the sea, Yuquan's expression finally changed. This was because he sensed a power of heaven and earth that made him shudder beside Li Mu. However, the strange thing was that this power of heaven and earth wasn't targeted at him. Instead, it was targeted at Li Mu. Is he crazy? This thought immediately appeared in Yuquan's mind. Such a huge amount of power of heaven and earth made even him feel that his life was in danger. Li Mu, who was in the middle of it, would only end up with his body and soul destroyed. Suddenly, Li Mu's hand seals changed. His lips trembled as if he was chanting an extremely short mantra. In the next moment, the scene in front of Yuquan suddenly changed. Li Mu's figure appeared where he was originally standing. Meanwhile, he appeared where Li Mu was, at the center of that huge amount of power of heaven and earth. Forcefully using the forwarding mantra of the 9 syllables to switch places with Yuquan, whose cultivation was far higher than his, Li Mu was injured quite badly in an instant. However, this also caused the person who suffered the backlash of the power of heaven and earth to become Yuquan. This was his true trump card. People often used others to do their dirty work, and Li Mu was using the way of heaven to do his dirty work. At this moment, facing the huge amount of power of heaven and earth, the fire in Yuquan's eyes suddenly jumped. He wanted to escape, but it was too late. Countless streams of power of heaven and earth surged into his body. His primordial spirit was severely injured in an instant. At this moment, Yuquan could even smell the scent of death. This was the first time he felt the taste of death after reaching the 8th level. The Empress figure appeared beside Li Mu in time. She held his hand and transferred her magic power into Li Mu's body. On the other side, Yuquan's figure fell from the void into the sea. Although he wasn't directly killed, he was extremely weak. Yuquan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked up at Li Mu. His voice was filled with fear and disbelief. What kind of ability is this? Chapter 651. Apart from Yuquan's voice, there was only silence between heaven and earth. Everyone had witnessed the power of the 8th level just now. It was a gap that could not be made up for by any magic power or Dharma artifacts. Yuan Luo, who had just ascended, was already so strong, let alone Yuquan, who had ascended to the 8th level a long time ago. However, someone as strong as Yuquan, the 3rd patriarch of the demonic path, had been reduced to such a state before he could even make a move. Furthermore, his opponent was only at the 7th level. At this moment, not only Yuquan, but everyone had the same question in their minds. What kind of magic is that? Li Mu certainly would not miss this opportunity. Tianjizi had once said that his chances of winning against Yuquan were between 40 and 60. Even if he had 60% and Yuquan had 40%, it was still very likely that he would not be able to kill Yuquan in one move. Therefore, he was already prepared to deal the finishing blow. With a thought, the sun-shooting bow appeared in his hand. Li Mu handed it to the Empress behind him. Zhou did not hesitate and immediately shot an arrow. A golden arrow whizzed past and went straight for the severely injured Yuquan. After suffering the backlash of the heavenly Tao from the Tao Te Ching, although Yuquan did not die, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. This arrow was enough to kill him completely. However, just as the sun-shooting bow's arrow was about to reach Yuquan, the space there fluctuated and Xianxia's figure appeared. He stretched out his hand and suddenly grabbed the golden arrow. Then Xianxian clenched his fist and the arrow directly collapsed. An arrow shot from the sun-shooting bow by a 7th-level cultivator was still unable to pose a threat to a Dao integration stage expert. However, even Xianxian, who had easily crushed the arrow, looked at Li Mu with an extremely shocked expression after saving Yuquan. It was not rare for them to fight above their level. The ancestors had killed enemies above their level more than once in a long time, but that was when they were at a lower level. They had never seen anyone who could kill a Dao integration stage expert as a transcendent cultivator. This went against their understanding of cultivation. An instant later, Bai Di, Tianjizi and Yuan Luo also appeared. Seeing the shocked Xianxian and the severely injured Yuquan, they immediately realized what had just happened. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Li Mu. Li Mu and the Empress stood hand in hand and looked directly at Xianxian and Yuan Luo. He calmly asked, "Who else wants to try next? First ancestor Xianxian or second ancestor Yuan Luo?" Hearing this, Xianxian and Yuan Luo quickly retreated with the heavily injured Yuquan. Although they still didn't know how Li Mu had managed to injure Yuquan, they were still able to contend with Tianjizi and Bai Di at the moment. If they were to seriously injure another one of them, the balance between the 8 realms would immediately be broken. At that time they would definitely lose. Tianjizi floated in the air and looked at the spring. "Stop." Is this what you want to see? Xianxia and Yuan Luo's faces were gloomy. 10,000 years of planning had finally led to this moment. Originally, this battle was in the bag, but with the appearance of Li Mu the biggest variable, they had failed just as it started. Bai Di and Tianjizi could completely restrain the two of them. As for the other experts of the demonic path, they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers compared to the alliance of the orthodox sections. Moreover, the other side had the Empress of the Great Show, the ghost servant, the old man from the Fulu school, and another middle-aged man. With Xianxia and Yuan Luo's eyesight, they could tell at a glance that among the four of them, only Xian Ming had the strength to fight against them. With the addition of the Black Dragon clan, they no longer had any chance after Yuquan lost his ability to fight. Their plan to seize the heavenly book from Li Mu and reopen the gate of heaven would also fail. If the orthodox sects hadn't destroyed the path to heaven 10,000 years ago, why would the disciples of the sage sect stay here and fight to the death with the mutated beasts and eventually be destroyed? Over the past 10,000 years, they had only had one goal in mind: to reopen the gate of heaven and then sacrifice all the living beings in the 10 continents to make up for their 10,000 years of cultivation. Then they would enter the Taoyuan and avenge the 100,000 disciples of the sage sect. They had waited 10,000 years for this moment. If they failed today, they didn't know how long they would have to wait. The two of them were extremely unwilling. After taking a few deep breaths, Xianxia made a prompt decision and said, "Retreat." They had already endured 10,000 years and didn't care about enduring another 10,000 years. Caution and caution were the fundamental reasons why the sage sect could survive for 10,000 years. However, just as the two of them were about to lead the demonic path to retreat, Yuquan's weak voice suddenly came from behind them. "Wait." Although the voice was weak, it contained excitement, shock, and disbelief. Yuquan looked at the sea below and couldn't suppress the excitement in his voice. He said in a trembling voice, "Look, what is that?" Yuan Luo and Xianxia looked down and saw a floating island on the sea. Because of the battle just now, the waves on the sea were undulating, and the island was undulating with the waves. Everyone's attention was attracted by the battle just now, and no one noticed the island at all. When they saw the island, Yuan Luo and Xianxia were overjoyed. The changes in their expressions didn't escape Li Mu's eyes. He quickly realized the source and looked at the surface of the South Sea. There an island was undulating in the waves. It was the floating island that Ao Feng and the others had brought from the depths of the South Sea. At this time, Xianxia had already flown to the floating island. Yuan Luo and Yuquan also quickly controlled the ghost island and came to the floating island. At this time, Xianxia raised his hands, and a huge object was moved out of the flask space. It landed heavily on the sea and splashed up dozens of feet of water. It was also an island. After this island entered the water, it floated on the sea like the ghost island and the floating island on the left and right. The 3 islands were gathered, and the 3 ancestors of the demonic path were excited. Li Mu instinctively felt that something was wrong, but he didn't know anything about it. After being stunned for a moment, Tianjizi's face suddenly revealed a look of understanding. He muttered, I see. Li Mu turned his head and asked, "What do you mean?" Without waiting for Tianjizi to speak, Xianxia laughed and said, "Kunlun, oh Kunlun, we have been looking for you for 10,000 years. I didn't expect you to be here." Li Mu's eyes flashed. Kunlun, one of the 3 legendary immortal mountains. Throughout history, countless cultivators went out to sea to search. It was said that if one found the 3 immortal mountains, they would be able to see the secret of immortality. When Li Mu first entered the cultivation world, he had seen such a description in countless books. He thought it was just a rumor. He didn't expect Kunlun to really exist. The legendary immortal mountains were actually so unremarkable. No wonder no cultivator had found them. If this island was the legendary Kunlun, then the island that the Ghost Island and Xiantian had moved out of the flask space was Abadan Penglai. Who would have thought that the 3 mysterious immortal mountains in all kinds of legends were actually such unremarkable islands? Moreover, 2 of them were in the hands of the demonic path. The Black Dragon clan had been ordered by Li Mu to go out to sea to search for the Ghost Island, and by a freak combination of factors, they had brought back the last island. Li Mu saw the reactions of the 3 ancestors of the demonic path again and suddenly had a bad premonition. At this moment, the 3 floating islands had been connected under the control of Xiantian and the other 2. Although the 3 islands had different shapes, The bumps on their surfaces complemented each other. Just like this, they were put together as if they were originally one. The next moment, from the center of the three islands, a golden pillar of light shot up into the sky. In the sky, a huge vortex appeared and began to slowly rotate. From the moment the three ancestors of the demonic path discovered the floating islands to the moment the three islands merged, the pillar of light shot up into the sky, and the vortex appeared. All of this happened in an extremely short period of time. It was so short that no one present had time to react, nor did they know how to react. Looking at the vortex in the sky, Xianxia couldn't help but laugh. His voice echoed throughout the South Sea. Ah, so what if you destroyed the path to the heavens? After 10,000 years, it was still rebuilt by us. Xianxia Taoist Xianqing Taoist Priest Jin Yi Wanderer Wuyo, you better be alive. One day, I will use your heads as a blood sacrifice to my 100,000 fellow disciples of the sage sect. Chapter 652. For 10,000 years, the demon path had not only been searching for the heavenly book, but also the three islands. The heavenly book was not the only way to enter the peach blossom. The earliest path to heaven was related to the three celestial mountains. However, in the vast sea, it was extremely difficult to find an inconspicuous island whose location was not fixed. In the past 10,000 years they had found Fengzhang and Pinglai one after another, but they had never found the whereabouts of Kunlun. Just when they thought that the operation had failed, the situation took another turn. The three of them stared at the vortex in the sky, their eyes blazing. After the golden light passed, the whirlpool that appeared in the sky was too shocking. Whether it was the devil path experts or the righteous path experts, all of them were unable to take their eyes off the slowly rotating whirlpool. All of their attention was attracted to it. As the vortex slowly rotated, a strange power surged out of the vortex. Feeling that strange power, Li Mu's eyes suddenly widened and he blurted out, "This is..." The power that surged out of the vortex was very similar to the power of the great sky-stealing array. Soon it spread to everyone's side. After a moment, Li Mu was shocked to find that his spiritual power, which had not increased for many days, showed signs of a breakthrough. Li Mu and the Empress looked at each other and saw the same surprise in her eyes. At this moment they were not the only ones who felt this. Almost all the experts here, whether they were of the righteous path or the demon path, felt the signs of the spiritual power in their bodies increasing. Ao Feng was stunned for a moment before he realized that it was not only his spiritual power that showed signs of growth, but also his lifespan. The power that surged out of the vortex could not only increase one's cultivation, but also their lifespan. At this moment, all the experts present looked at the vortex in the sky with a strong desire in their eyes. In the 10 continents where the spiritual qi was very thin, the world behind the vortex was a fatal attraction to them. Shen Tian Yuan Luo Yuquan, and the three ancestors of the Fiend Dao immediately flew towards the vortex. Only by entering the peach garden at the first moment and seizing the initiative would they be able to monopolize the path to heaven and prevent others from entering. Taking a breath of the peach blossom qi would loosen their bottlenecks. They only needed to cultivate in the peach blossom for a period of time, and their cultivation would soar. At that time, whether it was Tianjizi Emperor Bai or Li Mu, they would be no match for them. At that time, the life and death of the billions of living beings in the 10 continents would be in their hands. As long as they sacrificed all of them, they would be able to make up for their cultivation that had lagged behind in the past 10,000 years. It would only be a matter of time before they could enter the peach garden and take revenge for the destruction of their sect. The three ancestors of the demonic Dao looked excited as they approached the vortex at their fastest speed. However, when they were halfway there, their bodies came to an abrupt halt and they all raised their heads to look at the vortex. A ripple had appeared within the vortex at some point, and it was continuously expanding as if something was trying to come out of the vortex. At the same time, a formless pressure spread out, stopping Yu Quan and the others from advancing. In the next moment, a huge head popped out from the ripples that were constantly spreading. It was the head of a beast that looked like a horse but was not. It had sharp horns on its head and black scales covered its neck. There had never been such a creature in the 10 continents. The beast's head was huge. Just its head alone was 100 feet long, and its complete body was at least 100 feet long. The aura it exuded was comparable to that of Emperor Bai and Shen Tian. This was a level 8 exotic beast, exactly the same as a certain exotic beast that Li Mu had seen in the heavenly book. When the three ancestors of the demonic Dao saw this, their expressions changed. Xianxia's voice was filled with shock and anger. Barge beast. Why is there a barge beast in the peach blossom? In ancient times, there was a beast that looked like a horse, with a white body and a black tail. It had a horn, tiger teeth, claws, and a drum-like sound. Its name was Barge. The barge beast was a type of exotic beast from ancient times. Like other ferocious beasts, it was ferocious and had wreaked havoc on the earth in ancient times. Countless humans and cultivators had died at its hands. However, ever since the sage sect sacrificed 100,000 disciples and fought a final battle with the exotic beast at the cost of the sect's destruction, the barge beast went extinct just like the other exotic beasts. Not a single barge beast had appeared in the 10 continents for 10,000 years. This was the first time the 3 ancestors of the demonic Dao had seen an exotic beast from 10,000 years ago. At this moment, the barge beast's entire body had squeezed out of the whirlpool. It was shaped like a horse with a horn on its head. Its body was covered in thick scales and its claws were as sharp as a tiger's. Ever since it had descended from the whirlpool, an extremely ferocious aura had spread in all directions. However, when it sensed the powerful auras around it, especially Shen Tian Yuan Luo, Emperor Bai, and the others, the ferocious look in its eyes faded and was replaced by deep fear. It turned its head abruptly and squeezed back into the whirlpool. The whirlpool in the sky continued to spin, but everyone's gaze turned from longing to fear. What was that just now? I've never seen it before. Could that be the exotic beast they were talking about? There are actually such powerful murderers in this world. Did they also once exist in the 10 continents? Everyone could not help but murmur. Shen Tian Yuan Luo and Yu Quan, who were at the front, were shocked and shook their heads repeatedly. Impossible, this is impossible. Exotic beasts have already gone extinct in the 10 continents. We personally eradicated them. How could there be exotic beasts in the peach garden? Could it be that exotic beasts also went to the peach garden? The 3 of them looked at each other and in the next moment they flew toward the whirlpool without hesitation. Worried that the 3 ancestors of the demonic Dao were up to something, Li Mu turned to the Empress and said, "Wait for me here." With that he flew up, followed by Tianjizi and Emperor Bai. Zhou Yi did not listen to Li Mu and followed without hesitation. If that exotic beast could pass through the whirlpool, others should be able to as well. When he was about to pass through the whirlpool, Li Mu hesitated for a moment, but still flew in without hesitation. When he passed through the whirlpool, there was a slight feeling of obstruction as if he had passed through a layer of water. Then all the pores on Li Mu's body opened up, greedily absorbing an extremely abundant power. His stagnant cultivation began to slowly increase. Although Li Mu was still very young and could not foresee the limits of his lifespan, he was very clear that at this moment his lifespan was also slowly increasing. The legends were correct. The other end of the path to heaven was a paradise for cultivators. But this thought only existed in Li Mu's mind for a moment. He raised his head and found that they were in a vast and boundless space. The sky here was gray, and although the spiritual energy was very abundant, it was also filled with a fiendish aura. And the source of this fiendish aura was quickly determined by Li Mu. On the ground in the distance, there were exotic beasts hundreds of feet tall walking slowly. In the sky there were also countless exotic beasts flying. At a glance, Li Mu saw no less than dozens of exotic beasts. It was as if they had not come to a paradise, but a nest of exotic beasts. A familiar aura came from beside him and Li Mu's expression changed. He turned to the Empress and said in surprise, "Why are you here too?" Zhou Yi glanced at him and did not speak. Li Mu had a helpless expression. He could only take her hand and say, "Stay by my side, don't run around." In a strange space, the 3 ancestors of the demonic path looked at the scene in front of them with shock. On the ground there were many exotic beasts' corpses. It was unknown how long they had been dead, but they had all turned into fossils. Suddenly, as if he had discovered something, Li Mu quickly walked forward. In front of him, there was a dead exotic beast with a sword stabbed into its forehead. This sword was already rusty and had no spiritual energy at all. There were also many flaws on the blade. A petrified corpse held the sword with both hands, as if it had used all its strength to stab it into the exotic beast's head in its final moments. A figure quickly flew to Li Mu's side. Li Mu had a vigilant expression. He held the Empress with one hand and formed a seal with the other. If Xian Tian did anything, Li Mu would immediately let him taste the backlash of the paradise. However, Xiantian didn't even look at Li Mu. His eyes swept over the petrified corpse and focused on the sword. After a long time he hoarsely said, "Pure Yang sword, Master Pure Yang." Another figure flew over. Tianjizi stood in front of the petrified corpse. He slowly reached out a hand and gently stroked the stone corpse's face. Then he fell into a long silence. Li Mu looked around and discovered that among the exotic beast corpses, there were also many human corpses. They had clearly been dead for a long time and their bodies had already turned into fossils. It was difficult to recognize their original faces. Yuan Luo came to the ground and looked at the one-armed corpse beside an exotic beast corpse. After a long silence he said with difficulty, "Daoist Xianxia." Yu Quan dragged his injured body and wandered through the forest of exotic beast corpses. He spoke again and again with an indescribable expression. His voice grew weaker and weaker. Taoist priest Jin Yi wanderer Wu Yu Tainuzi Wuweizi. Chapter 653. Li Mu looked at all this in silence. The three ancestors of the demon way were talking about the righteous path experts who had discovered the Taoyuan and destroyed the path to heaven 10,000 years ago. For 10,000 years, everyone thought that they had found the Taoyuan and obtained immortality. Today they discovered that they had all fallen here. Judging from the state of their corpses, these righteous path experts had been dead for at least 10,000 years. Li Mu looked around, then walked dozens of steps in a direction and came in front of a stone tablet. This stone tablet was about 10 feet tall and 5 feet wide. There were words on it. The language of the 10 continents had been passed down for 10,000 years. Li Mu could easily read the words on the stone tablet. "We have searched for the Taoyuan for countless years, only to find out that the Taoyuan was the source of beasts. Today the path to heaven has been cut off, the source of the strange beast. If anyone in the future is fated to come here, take this as a warning. Do not reopen the gate of heaven. Remember. The inscription was only a short paragraph and the handwriting was messy. It was obvious that it had been left behind when the situation was extremely critical. They did not have time to record more, so they used the shortest words to leave behind a warning for those who came after. Li Mu also came here and saw the inscription. Only then did he know that the strange beasts were not the native races of the 10 continents that coexisted with humans in ancient times. They were invaders from the Taoyuan. It was no wonder that the strange beasts were inexhaustible at that time. When the righteous path experts found the Taoyuan, they also discovered this secret. They were caught in a life-and-death battle with the strange beasts in the Taoyuan. Unable to escape, they could only forcibly destroy the path to heaven and cut off the source of the strange beasts. In this way, after the sage sect and the strange beasts that existed on the continent perished together, the 10 continents had 10,000 years of peace. They were not selfish traitors who enjoyed immortality alone. They fought the strange beasts until their deaths. But these righteous path experts who sacrificed themselves in foreign lands in order to protect the 10 continents were misunderstood for 10,000 years until today. The greatest secret from 10,000 years ago was revealed. The three ancestors of the demon way stood in front of the stone tablet, their expressions extremely wooden. Even with their 8th realm cultivation, they could not stop their bodies from trembling slightly. At this moment, the exotic beasts in the distance had already discovered them and were rapidly approaching them. Among them, only the barge had an aura comparable to the 8th level. However, Li Mu could sense several other powerful existences that were not weaker than the barge from a great distance away. They would arrive here very soon. Li Mu's expression changed slightly and he made a prompt decision. "It's too late. Let's go back quickly. We have to separate the 3 islands as soon as possible and cut off the connection with the Peach Blossom Spring." The 3 ancestors of the demonic Dao remained where they were. Xiantian glanced at the beasts in the distance before turning to Li Mu and saying, "All of you leave. Someone has to stay behind." Li Mu looked at the first ancestor of the demonic path and discovered that 2 streams of blood were flowing down from his eyes. Countless experts of the demonic path, including Xiantian, Yuan Luo, and Yu Quan, had passed down their memories for 10,000 years because of their unforgettable hatred for the righteous path experts and the righteous path experts of the 10 continents. Only today did they realize that the person they had hated for 10,000 years was not a traitor but a hero. Those people were just like them or even more, but they had to bear the infamy of 10,000 years. In these 10,000 years, the demonic path had killed hundreds of millions of lives in the 10 continents for revenge. They relied on hatred to survive. Li Mu didn't know how Xian Tian and the others were feeling at this moment, but they did need someone to stop those powerful beasts and give him time to destroy the path to the heavens. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi and asked, "Senior Tianjizi, you?" Tianjizi smiled at Li Mu and said, "This old man has lived long enough. You all go. The 10 continents will be left to you all." The powerful beasts in the distance were rapidly approaching. Li Mu didn't have time to hesitate. He gave Tianjizi one last look before flying toward the whirlpool with the Empress. White Emperor followed closely behind them. Before leaving, Li Mu released Xianming and then flew into the whirlpool hand in hand with the Empress. In the next moment, the blue sea appeared in front of them again. Li Mu and White Emperor looked at each other. White Emperor nodded and his body swelled up. He raised his palm and pressed it down. An illusory palm that was hundreds of feet in size quickly formed. It had the power to destroy heaven and earth and landed on the 3 islands that had merged into one. As the palm landed, the seawater quickly retreated in all directions. The 3 islands directly smashed into the bottom of the sea, but only some soil and rocks fell around the islands. The pillar of light that shot into the sky was still there. The path to the heavens was much more difficult to destroy than Li Mu had imagined. He took out the sun-shooting bow and shot an arrow. The arrow that consumed half of his spiritual power didn't cause much damage to the islands. In the sky, the whirlpool was still spinning. Li Mu knew that there wasn't much time to waste, so he shouted loudly. His voice resounded through the world. "Everyone, destroy this island with me." Taoism, Buddhism, Demon Nation, Ghost Realm, Yong Nation, Great Zhou and the Black Dragon races elites didn't know what was going on, but they had absolute trust in Li Mu. Dozens of 7th Realm elites joined forces and immediately attacked the 3 connected islands. When the Demon Path elites saw this, there was a commotion. The ancestors flew into the whirlpool and didn't come out for a long time. Li Mu just came out and wanted to destroy the path to the heavens that the ancestors had worked so hard to open. How could they just sit by and watch? In the next moment, a Demon Path elite immediately shouted, "Stop them." The righteous and demonic sides couldn't coexist. No matter what Li Mu wanted to do, they just had to oppose him. But at this moment, another figure flew out from the whirlpool in the sky. Xianming stood in front of the whirlpool in a daze. Her originally pale face became even paler. When the Demon Path elite saw her, they stopped moving. The leader looked at Xianming respectfully and bowed with cupped fists. "Greetings, 5th ancestor. The 3rd ancestor has entered the Taoyuan. We will listen to 5th ancestor's orders." Xianming's eyes scanned the people of the demonic sect. Eventually she looked at Li Mu. This time there was no anger or disgust in her eyes. There was only a complicated emotion that she couldn't describe. Li Mu understood the emotion in Xianming's eyes. It was endless guilt, endless regret, and a trace of relief. In the next moment, Xianming waved her sleeves, and 7 flowing lights flew out and quickly flew toward Li Mu. Li Mu reached out and grabbed the air. A huge palm appeared in the sky and grabbed the 7 ancient pages. After looking at Li Mu again, Xianming looked at the Demon Path elites below and said in a low voice, "All disciples of the Sage Sect, follow me into the Taoyuan." As soon as she finished speaking, she flew back into the whirlpool without looking back. Dozens of flowing lights streaked across the sky. After Xianming spoke, all the level 7 elites of the Demon Path followed her into the whirlpool without hesitation. Facing the ferocious beasts on the other side of the whirlpool, Li Mu already knew what decision the Demon Path ancestors had made. 10,000 years ago they had made the same decision. The notorious Demon Path was once the protector of the 10 continents. Their hatred for the 10 continents and the orthodox path originated from a misunderstanding. Because of this misunderstanding, they had committed too many sins. This was the only ending they could choose. Li Mu looked up at the whirlpool in the sky and said in a low voice, "Let's attack together and destroy this island." Boom! Dozens of dazzling spells bombarded the 3 islands. In an instant, the 3 islands shattered into countless pieces. The shattered islands could no longer float on the surface of the sea. They slowly sank to the bottom of the sea with the waves. The moment the 3 islands shattered, the golden pillars of light that shot into the sky disappeared. The huge whirlpool in the sky also slowly dissipated. Between heaven and earth, there was silence. Only the sound of waves echoed. A crisp sound was covered by the sound of waves, but it still did not escape Li Mu's ears. He waved his hand and a tower flew out from the bottom of the sea. This tower was used by Yuquan to avoid calamities. Although there were countless cracks on the surface of the tower, it was not completely destroyed yet. But another crisp sound came from the tower. Li Mu stretched out his hand and countless jade talismans flew out of the tower. Pa pa pa. These jade talismans continued to shatter as they flew out. The shattering of each jade talisman represented the fall of a 7th-level demon cultivator. The crisp sound of jade talismans shattering continued. Li Mu looked up at the sky. The place where the whirlpool had appeared was a calm blue sky. However, everyone could imagine how tragic and bloody the other side of this calm sky was. Bang. In an instant the calm here was broken again. After a dull sound, the space where the whirlpool had appeared began to collapse. Cracks spread out, and from those cracks, one could faintly see the figures of countless strange beasts. Although the cracks were quickly repaired, this also meant that the power of space here was very weak. Even if there was no path to the heavens, the strange beasts of the paradise might one day break through space and descend. Looking at the slowly disappearing cracks in space, Li Mu had some understanding at this moment. The rise of the demon cultivators was not the apocalyptic catastrophe that Tianjizi had predicted. With the current strength of the cultivators of the 10 continents, if the disaster from 10,000 years ago happened again, and the strange beasts broke through space and descended on the 10 continents, the living beings of the 10 continents would have no power to resist. This was the true catastrophe of the 10 continents. Chapter 654. Li Mu looked at the thin space and fell silent. Xian Tian, Yuan Luo, Yuquan, and Tianjizi had stayed in the peach blossom forever in order to delay the exotic beasts and give Li Mu time to destroy the path to heaven. Xian Ming led dozens of 7th-level demon path experts into the peach blossom at the last moment. In a very short period of time, the top experts of the 10 continents had died. The loss of 4 8th-level demon path experts had probably reduced the combat power of the 10 continents by more than 70%. Now Emperor Bai was the only 8th-level demon path expert left in the 10 continents. 10,000 years ago, there were countless experts in the 10 continents and they were evenly matched against the powerful exotic beasts. However, the spirit chi of the 10 continents had been depleted over the past 10,000 years and it was no longer possible for the prosperous cultivation scene of 10,000 years ago to reappear. Once the exotic beasts descended again, all the living beings in the 10 continents would experience a catastrophe. The richness of the spirit chi in the peach blossom meant that more experts would be born there. Even the exotic beasts were so powerful. Just in the area just now, several 8th-level demon path experts had appeared. If Xian Tian, Tianjizi, and the others had not stayed behind, just those few exotic beasts alone would have been able to destroy the 10 continents. At this moment, the people present still did not know what had happened, but their hearts were inexplicably covered by a layer of dark clouds. Fu Daozi was the first to break the silence. He flew to Li Mu's side and asked, "What exactly happened? What is on the other side of the vortex? Why did the demon path people all go there?" The 10 continents were about to face the greatest catastrophe in history. As the only remaining experts of the 10 continents, they had the right and must know the truth. Li Mu was silent for a moment and said slowly, "Everything started from 10,000 years ago." After Li Mu finished speaking, the crowd fell into a long silence again. For the first time, they knew that the demon path, which had done all kinds of evil and harmed the continent for 10,000 years, actually had such a heroic history. At the same time, they also knew about the exotic beasts war 10,000 years ago and the catastrophe they were about to face. After Li Mu told them everything, many people's faces were filled with despair. Those exotic beasts were so powerful that just the aura that they exuded was difficult to resist. How were they going to fight against such ferocious beasts? At this moment, everyone's eyes were on Li Mu. If there was still hope for the 10 continents, it would definitely be. Li Mu sorted out his emotions and looked at everyone. Senior Tianjizi and the demonic cultivators fought with their lives to buy us some time. Although the strange beast is powerful, we can't give up. From now on, the 10 continents must unite. The sect masters of the 6 sects looked at each other. Then Mystic Sect Master Miao Yunzi cupped his fists and said, "From now on, the Mystic Sect will follow fellow Daoist Ling Jizi's orders. The Southern Sect will obey fellow Daoist Ling Jizi's orders. Sect to give it sect to sect, Dan Cauldron Sect obeys. Sect to sect." The other sect leaders also spoke one after another, expressing their attitude. The other forces did not hesitate for long. They also cupped their fists and bowed. "We are willing to listen to your orders." In the face of the catastrophe, no matter what reason they had united before at this moment, they had all put aside any selfish thoughts and were determined to resist the catastrophe that the 10 continents were about to face. Everyone's eyes were focused on him. Li Mu felt even more pressure. He first arranged for the powerhouses to take turns to guard this place and pay attention to the movements in this space. Then he returned to the imperial palace of this small southern country and pondered alone in a palace. What was certain was that the Peach Garden and the 10 continents were two different worlds. If the exotic beasts of the Peach Garden descended, it would be a great blow to the cultivators of the 10 continents. No matter how they united, they would not be able to defeat those exotic beasts. Li Mu thought for a long time. Then he stretched out his hand and pages of the heavenly book appeared in his hand. Before entering the Peach Garden, Xian Ming gave the 7-page heavenly book of the Devil Path to Li Mu. At this moment, Li Mu had 21 pages of the heavenly book in his hand. As long as he found the last 3 pages of the heavenly book, he would be able to open the door. Li Mu did not know if the door, like the path to heaven, led to the nest of the exotic beasts. However, the mysterious heavenly book was indeed one of the last hopes of the 10 continents. If he could attract the spiritual qi of the Peach Garden, the strength of the powerhouses of the 10 continents would undergo a leap, and they might be able to resist the exotic beasts. However, even if the 21 pages of the heavenly book were gathered, the door was about to solidify, but it was still a little short. If he wanted it to completely solidify, he had to find the last 3 pages of the heavenly book. At this moment, Li Mu did not have any information about the 3 pages of the heavenly book. There were 24 pages of the heavenly book. Most of the pages had a clear owner, such as the Taoist sect, the Buddhist sect, and so on. However, there were a few pages that were lost in the long river of history, such as the heavenly book of the Dragon Tribe. If it were not for a coincidence, they would not have been found. Suddenly, Li Mu looked at the 21 pages of the heavenly book in his hand. When these heavenly books were neatly stacked together, he had a kind of feeling between the heavenly books. It seemed that there was a page of the heavenly book near him. At the same time, a breath appeared outside the door. Li Mu put away the heavenly book, opened the door, and saw Zhou Xian standing outside. Zhou Xian stretched out his hand and a page appeared in his palm. He looked at Li Mu and said, "I saw that the 5th ancestor of the Devil Path, Xian Ming, gave you the heavenly book before he left. I think the heavenly book should be useful to you. This page of the heavenly book is useless to me. Keep it." When Li Mu saw this page of the heavenly book, he already understood a lot of things. The legalists actually had an independent page of the heavenly book, and it was in Zhou Xian's hands. No wonder he could transcend using the legalist path, and his strength was far superior to his peers. Li Mu put away the heavenly book, nodded, and said, "The heavenly book is indeed related to the catastrophe of the 10 continents in the future. It might even be the only hope. Including your page, I have 22 pages of the heavenly book, but I don't know where the other 2 pages are." Zhou Xian pondered for a moment, then said, "I once felt the breath of another page of the heavenly book in the divine capital. The heavenly books could sense each other. As long as the 2 pages were not far away from each other and were not in the flask space, the owners of the heavenly books could sense each other's existence." After hearing about the other page of the heavenly book, Li Mu immediately returned to the divine capital with the Empress. He took out the page of the heavenly book and did not feel the existence of the other heavenly books. If the page of the heavenly book was still in the divine capital, it must have been stored in the flask space or the flask space. Currently, only the Empress and he were at the 7th realm in the divine capital, so the latter was unlikely. Li Mu thought for a moment and took out all the heavenly books. The senses of the 22 pages were far greater than that of the 1 page. Even if the page of the heavenly book was in the flask space, it could not cut off all the connections between the heavenly books. As expected, when all 22 pages of the heavenly book appeared in Li Mu's hands, Li Mu left and sensed the weak breath of the heavenly book from a certain direction. His body instantly disappeared from the spot, and when he reappeared he was already in a familiar building. Li Mu had been here countless times. It was the imperial ancestral temple in the palace. Inside the temple, Zhang Chun and Prince Shou were leisurely sunbathing. When they saw Li Mu appear, both of them were stunned. Then Zhang Chun climbed up from the chair and said in surprise, "Lord Li, you're back. Come and sit." Li Mu looked at Zhang Chun and Prince Shou. In his eyes, the two of them were completely different from before. On the surface, Zhang Chun's cultivation was at the 5th realm, but his true cultivation was already at the Dongxian realm. As for King Shou, the cultivation he revealed on the surface was similarly at the creation realm. But at this moment, Li Mu was very clearly aware that even if Zhou Zhong and Fu Daozi were to fight him, they would only have a 50% chance of victory. The connection between Li Mu and the page of the heavenly book came from Prince Shou. Li Mu did not sit down. He looked at Prince Shou and said, "Your Highness, Prince Shou is really good at hiding things. I wonder how many people have been fooled by you." Prince Shou was stunned for a moment and then he asked in confusion, "What are you talking about, Lord Li? I don't understand at all." Li Mu waved his hand and an image appeared in the void. It was the image of the barge appearing from the whirlpool at the shore of the South Sea. Crack. The reclining chair under Prince Shou shattered. Then his expression changed drastically as he said in shock, "It's over, it's over. Aren't these things all dead? Why did they appear again?" It seemed like Prince Shou had found out some secrets from the heavenly book. Li Mu went straight to the point and said, "The strange beasts are about to descend. The 10 continents are facing another great calamity in 10,000 years. To deal with this calamity, the heavenly book is extremely important. I hope your Highness Prince Shou can give it to me." Prince Shou got up from the ground. After a moment of silence, he stretched out his hand and a page appeared in his palm. Li Mu took the page and a trace of doubt arose in his heart. Prince Shou's cultivation did not seem to have advanced recently. If he had helped the Shao clan back then, they would have regained their power. However, he had been helping Li Mu indirectly. This was something that Li Mu still could not figure out. He looked at Prince Shou and could not help but ask, "Why?" Prince Shou knew what he wanted to ask. He sighed and said, "The answer is in the heavenly book." Li Mu's divine consciousness scanned the page in his hand. After being stunned for a moment, he understood everything. Zhou Zhong's heavenly book recorded the path of legalism. Prince Shou's heavenly book recorded the path of righteousness. To cultivate the path of righteousness, one must always uphold a kind of righteousness in one's heart. One must abandon one's selfish desires and always adhere to one's path of righteousness. His actions could not go against the righteousness in his heart. Otherwise, his cultivation would stagnate or even regress. The path of righteousness had its unique advantages, but it also had its unchangeable shortcomings. It was extremely difficult to cultivate this path. Even Li Mu himself could not guarantee that he would never have any selfish desires. His doubts about Prince Shou were finally resolved. After telling the two about the strange beasts, Li Mu left the imperial clan temple. Prince Shou looked up at the sky and said worriedly, "That kind of thing, no one in the 10 continents can fight against it. What should we do now?" Zhang Chun looked at him and said, "You actually hid your cultivation level. How sinister." Prince Shou glanced at him and said, "You're not any better than me. Dongxian just had to pretend to be a creation realm cultivator. What a sinister person." Li Mu could no longer hear the quarrel between Zhang Chun and Prince Shou. He stood in the Chang'e Palace, and the 23 pages of the heavenly book were stacked together and floating in his palm. There were 24 pages of the heavenly book and only the last page was left. An almost solid door appeared in front of him. Behind the door was a blur. Li Mu reached out his hand, but he could only pass through the door. Even with only one page missing, the door still could not be opened. Chapter 655. Tongzhou. The lush forest stretched endlessly. A figure flitted across the sky of Changzhou and soon disappeared into the horizon. Fenglin. The endless plains were deserted. Only wild cattle and sheep lowered their heads to nibble on the grass. A figure streaked across the sky and disappeared in an instant. Yuanzhou, Juku Prefecture. In a month, Li Mu traveled all over the 10 continents to find the whereabouts of the last page of the heavenly book. But even though he already had 23 pages of the heavenly book, he still could not sense the existence of the last page. The 10 continents were huge. Li Mu could not search all of them. He was just hoping that the last page of the heavenly book was lying quietly in some corner of the 10 continents and he could sense it. Unfortunately, fate did not favor him this time. In this month, the life talismans of dozens of demonic experts had all shattered. Li Mu had just received the news that in Xuanzong, Tianjizi's soul lamp had also been extinguished. There were only 4 jade talismans left in his hand. Sealed in them were the auras of the 4 demonic ancestors. These jade talismans were also full of cracks. Finally, at a certain moment, 3 of the 4 jade talismans cracked and shattered at the same time. Li Mu clenched his fist and the jade talisman fragments turned into dust. Li Mu flicked his palm. A breeze blew and the dust disappeared between heaven and earth. There was only 1 jade talisman left in his hand. The aura in this jade talisman belonged to Xianming. Li Mu put away the last jade talisman and returned to the shore of the South China Sea. The space that had once been connected to by the path of ingress had become even more fragile. It was impossible for him to waste all his time on searching for the heavenly tomes. In the South Sea, the 6 sect masters, the Buddhist Bantis, the Yao Nation, the Ghost Realm, the Great Zhou, the Dragon Clan, and other experts from various forces had gathered. Li Mu scanned the crowd and said, "Everyone knows that the 10 continents are about to face the greatest catastrophe in 10,000 years. If the cultivation world continues to be like this, even if the 10 continents unite, the possibility of resisting the peach blossom beast is not high. Therefore I have an idea that I would like to ask for your opinion." The young emperor cupped his fist to Li Mu and said, "Everyone is clear on the current situation. If Lord Li has any thoughts, feel free to speak. We will listen to you." Li Mu pondered for a moment and said, "There are 24 pages of the heavenly book in the world, which contain countless great Daoists of cultivation. The heavenly book is supposed to be a secret and should not be leaked out easily. However, in the face of the calamity, I can't care too much about it. I want to make the contents of the heavenly book public so that the cultivators of the 10 continents can comprehend it together. This will increase the strength of the cultivators and help them deal with the upcoming calamity. As for the rest of the heavenly tomes, Li Mu could make the decision. However, the heavenly tomes of the 5 sects were temporarily borrowed by Li Mu. The main reason he had gathered everyone this time was to seek their opinions. This time, the experts of the 5 sects did not hesitate in the slightest when faced with the heavenly tomes that were regarded as top secret by their sects and almost never leaked out. Miao Yunzi looked at Li Mu and said, "The heavenly tomes belong to the beings of the 10 continents. They do not belong to any sect or sect. It is selfish of the various sects to occupy them. I agree with Junior Ling Jizi's proposal." The Spirit Array sect agrees. The South sect agrees. The North sect agrees as well. In response to Li Mu's proposal, everyone quickly reached a consensus. At this moment, an expert of Yong suddenly said, "Since all the Daoists of cultivation in the world originate from the same heavenly book, why should we divide them into Buddhist, Daoist, Daoist, and Daoist? Daoist has Daoist, Daoist has Daoist, Daoist has Daoist, and Daoist has Daoist. The Dragon Clan also has Daoist." Daoist? This fellow Daoist's words have some truth in them. All the Daoists of the 10 continents originate from the heavenly tomes. If that is the case, then all of us are of the same sect. Daoist techniques are Daoist techniques, Buddhist techniques are Daoist techniques, demonic techniques and ghostly techniques are all Daoist techniques. The Dao sect is great. Yong's retired emperor's suggestion immediately triggered an even more heated discussion. In the past, due to their own interests, it was impossible for all parties to unite, much less share the heavenly tomes and resources. However, the current situation had changed. Under the threat of the strange beasts, all the living beings in the 10 continents were facing an enormous threat of life and death. Even the forces that had been hostile to each other in the past could not have the slightest bit of animosity in the face of a common enemy. Now that the 10 continents had united, everyone would share honor and disgrace, advance and retreat together. They had become one entity, so it was necessary to establish a unified organization to manage and mobilize the various parties. They were truly worthy of being Yong's experts. They had used their knowledge of governance here. If the Righteous Path sect was established, the cohesion of the Righteous Path Alliance would reach a new peak. Almost everyone agreed with this proposal. Before Li Mu even opened his mouth, they had already decided on this matter. At this moment, Yong's retired emperor spoke again. "A group of dragons cannot be without a leader. Since we want to establish the Dao sect, we need everyone to jointly elect a Dao head to guide and lead us." Before he could finish speaking, everyone's gazes turned to one direction. Apart from that person, no one else could shoulder the heavy responsibility of being the Dao head. Yong's retired emperor smiled. "I believe that even if this old man does not say who will assume the position of Dao head, everyone should have a candidate in mind. Li Mu had originally wanted to discuss the matter of the heavenly tomes. He hadn't expected that he would inexplicably establish a new sect and become the leader of the Dao sect. However, in the face of everyone's unanimous opinion, he did not raise any objections. Although he had no intention of taking the position of Dao head, the unification of the various powers would indeed greatly increase their cohesion. Before the strange beasts descended, increasing cohesion was as important as increasing strength. How to manage such a large sect was not something Li Mu had to consider. Xianxia and the others would take care of it. The next day, Li Mu opened a training ground in the southern sea and began to preach the Dao without interruption. The spatial connections were becoming weaker and weaker. He had no time to waste. He needed to pass down the Dao techniques of the heavenly tomes in the shortest time possible. Li Mu had already finished teaching Dao techniques, Buddhist techniques, ghost techniques and Yao techniques. At this moment, Li Mu's body was floating above the southern sea. The dragon clan of the four seas were gathered around him, listening to his teachings on the dragon clan's heavenly tomes. Just yesterday, Li Mu had used the Great Sky Pilfering Array to help Ao Feng and the others extend their lifespans. In the face of a great enemy, there was no need to be suspicious of the dragon clan. Li Mu's goal was not to help them extend their lifespans. After their lifespans were extended, their strength would also increase slightly. Of all the races on the continent, perhaps only the dragon clan could contend with the strange beasts. This was because they were originally strange beasts from the Taoyuan. Up until now, this was a secret that only Li Mu knew. They were almost invincible among their peers and had the strength of the fourth realm at birth. In the 10 continents, there was no creature like the dragon clan. This was determined by their bloodline and race. In the continuous teaching day and night, Li Mu also discovered something unexpected. That was, in the process of teaching, his cultivation increased faster and faster. It even surpassed the cultivation of telekinesis. Teaching seemed to be a way of cultivation. It was no wonder that since ancient times, those experts who had founded their own sects or created their own Dao techniques had all left their names behind in the long river of history. There was still such a miraculous power hidden in the passing down of Dao techniques. However, this kind of cultivation was like the 4 lines of Henku. It could not be replicated. The prerequisites for teaching Dao were, first, to establish a sect. Second, to create a new Dao technique and pass it down. The first point was already very difficult to achieve. Since ancient times, there were only a few people who could achieve both. Li Mu quickly realized that imparting the supernatural powers and Dao techniques from the heavenly tomes did not help him much. However, if he were to teach him the Dao techniques that he found out from the Buddhist scriptures on earth and that no one else in the 10 continents knew, his cultivation speed would immediately increase by a lot. For the world of the 10 continents, this was a new Dao technique. After thinking about it, Li Mu finally taught the 9 syllables mantra and the demon-slaying protection art to the powerhouses of the 10 continents. Firstly, this could allow his cultivation to increase rapidly. Secondly, it could also increase their strength. Li Mu had never taught these powerful Dao techniques to anyone other than those close to him. In the face of the catastrophe, the 6 sects selflessly offered the heavenly tomes. Li Mu could not be selfish and hide them. The power of these mantras was not in their power but in their speed of release. Although the power of these mantras was only about 50 to 60% of Li Mu's, it could still greatly increase their combat power and reduce the gap between them and the strange beasts. Of course, Li Mu himself also benefited a lot from it. In just a month, his dermic powers had increased by leaps and bounds. In the past, his true cultivation was only at the mid-stage of the 7th realm. With his Dao techniques, he could fight with a late-stage transcendence cultivator. Now, Li Mu's dermic powers had rapidly climbed to the peak of the 7th realm and vaguely touched a certain barrier. In the 10 continents where the spirit chi was scarce, it was impossible to reach the 8th realm through normal means. Today, Li Mu opened a new path and walked on a cultivation path that was different from everyone else. After he adjusted his dermic powers to the peak, Li Mu gathered Xianxia and the others and handed a jade talisman to Xianxia. Then he said, "I will be in seclusion for a few days to try to break through to the Dao integration stage. I will leave this place to you for now. If there is an emergency, you can crush this talisman and force me out of seclusion." Xianxia nodded and said, "Don't worry, junior brother. Leave this place to us." After arranging everything, Li Mu entered the flask space. In front of him was an extremely tall mountain of spirit jades. To break through to the Dao integration stage from the Transcendence realm, it required the support of an extremely large amount of spirit qi. For this, the dragon tribe of the Four Seas donated all of their spirit jades. Li Mu took a deep breath and slowly descended. His body sank into the mountain of spirit jades. The flask space fell into a long period of silence. In the 10 continents, a year passed in the blink of an eye. For the ordinary people of the various continents, this was an extremely ordinary year. Nothing major happened in the 10 continents. The Daoist sects, Buddhist sects, Yao Nation, Ghost Realm and all the other major forces were completely silent. There was no news. The ordinary people's lives were quiet and even a little boring. At the shore of the South Sea, dozens of figures floated in the void. Looking at a spatial crack in the sky that continued to expand, their expressions became more and more serious. When the spatial crack expanded to a certain limit, countless densely packed black shadows drilled out of the crack. Chapter 656. In the Demon Emperor's cave abode. The mountain of spirit jade that used to be hundreds of feet tall had disappeared, leaving only a pile of spirit jade dust on the grass beside the lake. The entire flask space was silent for a year. At a certain moment, a gust of wind suddenly blew in the cave abode. As the wind blew, the spiritual jade powder was blown into the air and melted into the lake. On the grass there was a person sitting cross-legged. His slightly closed eyes slowly opened. There was a flash of light in his eyes, and a powerful aura shot into the sky, shaking the entire cave abode. Li Mu floated up slowly and felt an unprecedented amount of dermic power in his body. He had been in seclusion for more than a year and had absorbed millions of superior-grade spirit jade. Today he had finally advanced from the Transcendent Pinnacle stage to the Dao integration stage. With the current level of spirit qi in the 10 continents, if he had not learned the Dao imparting technique in the Four Seas Dragon Tribe's help, this day would never have happened. Xianxia had not crushed the communication jade talisman Li Mu had given him in the past year, which meant that the situation outside was still under their control. Even so, Li Mu was very eager to understand the situation outside. With just a thought he disappeared from the cave abode. Somewhere in the South Sea, a few Dao sect disciples were fighting a strange beast with great difficulty. This beast had a pair of wings on its back and 2 eagle heads. 4 sharp claws protruded from its abdomen. Every time it attacked, the air would let out a sound like it was being torn apart. When the Dao sect disciples' magic treasures landed on its body, they could only make it cry out in pain. They were unable to injure it much. On the other hand, this strange beast's attacks were extremely fierce. If a human's body was touched by its sharp claws, their body would probably be destroyed immediately. One of the beast's 2 heads could spit out flames, while the other could spit out extremely cold air. If not for the Dao sect disciples' nimbleness, they would have died in this strange beast's hands. Even so, they were complaining in their hearts. This strange beast's body was too strong. They could not hurt it at all. If they continued to fight, their dermic powers would be exhausted. They would definitely die in this strange beast's hands. One of the disciples couldn't help but say, "Senior brother, this beast is too strong. Why don't we retreat?" Another white-robed youth was controlling a flying sword. His face was resolute as he said, "Retreat? Where can we retreat to? If we flee, we'll have to face our fellow disciples. If we have to flee even after encountering this beast, will we only be able to wait for death when an even more powerful beast arrives?" The white-clothed young man's cultivation had already reached the peak of the creation realm, and he was also the strongest among them. If he had not been restraining this strange beast, the others would have long been buried in its claws. When the Dao sect disciples heard this, they could only continue to fight bitterly. Suddenly the strange beast flapped its wings, stirring up a gust of wind. Their formation was instantly disrupted, and the exotic beast took the opportunity to close in, its claws grabbing at the white-clothed young man's head and heart. Its speed was as fast as lightning and the young man had no time to dodge at all. Just as he was about to detonate his body and escape with his primordial spirit, the strange beast suddenly gave up on attacking. It flapped its wings and retreated quickly. The young man sensed something and turned around. He saw a figure floating not far behind him. Qing Xuanzi's cultivation had increased a lot since the last time Li Mu saw him. He looked less arrogant and more fierce, like an unsheathed sword. The layer of murderous aura around him showed that he had experienced many life-and-death battles in the past few months. When they saw Li Mu, the Dao sect disciples including Qing Xuanzi were stunned for a moment. Then they exclaimed in surprise, "Taoist leader!" Li Mu flicked his finger and a bolt of lightning flashed. The strange beast whose aura was only at the 5th realm disappeared completely. Li Mu's expression was a little serious as he asked, "The strange beast has already arrived. Where are the Dao sect's experts?" This was originally the place where the path to heaven was destroyed, but the Dao sect's experts were nowhere to be seen. Moreover, the strange beast had already appeared in the 10 continents. Something big must have happened when Li Mu was in seclusion to break through. Qing Xuanzi put away his flying sword and immediately flew forward. He cupped his fists and said, "Taoist leader, 3 months ago, a spatial rift appeared in the sky above the South Sea. Many strange beasts flew out and the spatial rift began to move. In order to stabilize the space, the seniors of the Dao sect have been guarding around the spatial rift to prevent more powerful beasts from passing through. They should be in Yanzhou now." After hearing Qing Xuanzi's words, Li Mu was slightly relieved. The strange beasts did not invade on a large scale. Although there was a spatial rift connecting the 10 continents to Taoyuan, the rift could only allow some very weak strange beasts to pass through. It did not cause any serious consequences. He left a few bottles of healing and recovery elixirs for them and rushed to Yanzhou. At that moment, someone beside Qing Xuanzi asked curiously, "Senior brother, I heard that you used to know the Taoist leader. Is that true?" Recalling the past, Qing Xuanzi looked embarrassed. He waved his hand and said, "How is that possible? Don't talk nonsense. Quickly return to the sect and tell them that the Taoist leader has come out of seclusion." The South Sea was very close to Yanzhou. Li Mu followed the direction Qing Xuanzi pointed and arrived at the spatial rift in an instant. 27th realm cultivators of the Dao sect sat cross-legged in the void around the rift. They were trying their best to stabilize the rift and not let it continue to expand. The other dozens of people were meditating nearby, waiting for their turn. Li Mu released his aura and several figures immediately flew up. Xianxia looked at him and said in surprise, "Junior brother, you're finally out of seclusion." Li Mu nodded and asked, "How's the situation?" Xianxia looked at the spatial rift with a worried expression and said, "It's not optimistic. 3 months ago many low-level strange beasts ran out of this spatial rift. We've already tried our best to stabilize it but it's still expanding. I'm afraid that even stronger strange beasts will appear soon." As Qing Xuanzi spoke, another exotic beast comparable to a 6th realm cultivator appeared. The cultivators guarding nearby immediately attacked and killed it. Xianxia continued, 3 months ago a group of strange beasts suddenly appeared and caught us off guard. After that, all the strange beasts that came out of the spatial rift were killed. The earliest ones escaped to various places in the 10 continents, and we've been chasing after them." Li Mu looked at the spatial rift. Right now, strange beasts comparable to 6th realm had appeared. One day the spatial rift would expand to the point where it could withstand 7th and 8th realm beasts. The 10 continents could still handle 7th realm demonic beasts. Only Li Mu and Emperor Bai could handle 8th realm demonic beasts. If more than 3 8th realm demonic beasts or 1 9th realm demonic beast passed through the spatial crack, the entire Dao sect would be destroyed in an instant. Although it was already very impressive for him to reach 8th realm at such a young age, it was far from enough in the face of this catastrophe. Unless he could ascend to 9th realm. However, Li Mu had already used up all his tricks and resources to ascend to Dao integration so quickly. It was impossible for him to make consecutive breakthroughs in such a short time. Furthermore, the spirit qi in the 10 continents was so thin. As long as he continued to stay in the 10 continents, his cultivation would never improve. It was impossible for the 10 continents to give birth to another 9th realm cultivator. Li Mu looked at the crack again. Although there would be strange beasts poking their heads out from time to time, just the spiritual qi escaping from the crack was enough to relax all the pores on Li Mu's body and loosen his cultivation. On the other side of the spatial rift, the spirit qi was hundreds or thousands of times denser than here. Li Mu took a deep breath of the air that contained the aura of paradise. A bold idea suddenly appeared in his mind. Xianxia looked at Li Mu and seemed to see something. He said in shock, "Are you going to?" Li Mu nodded and said, "This is the only way." Not long after, in the divine capital of the Great Zhou, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing had just left Li Mu's arms when Wan Wan and Xiao Bai flew over. Li Mu hugged them and spun them around. The two girls ran away obediently. Li Mu hugged listening hard again and took it off before walking to the Empress. Zhou Yi stood where she was, suppressing the impulse in her heart. However, Li Mu hugged her by the waist and spun her around. She blushed and said angrily, "Put me down. Do you think I'm Wanwan and Xiao Bai?" Li Mu hugged her for a while before putting her down. Then he looked at Mr. Mei and Ali standing behind her and said with a smile, "Sister Mei has become younger again. What did Ali eat during this time? You've grown a lot." After more than a year of seclusion, Li Mu first accompanied Lu Hanyan and Li Qing for 2 days. Then he came to the palace and admired the flowers in the imperial garden with the Empress. They walked in the clouds and watched the sunset from the top of Chang'e Palace. When the red sun was about to disappear from sight, Li Mu was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I have something to tell your majesty." Zhou Yi didn't ask Li Mu. She only said indifferently, "I'll go with you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Your majesty, be good. Be good and wait for me to come back." Zhou Yi didn't speak again. She just leaned her head on Li Mu's shoulder and quietly looked into the distance. The two of them sat quietly like this until the moon was high in the sky. At a certain moment, Li Mu tilted his head and looked at her. He said softly, "It's getting late. I'm going back." He slowly stood up, but his wrist was held. Zhou Yi raised her head. Under the moonlight, her face was cold. The majesty of the Empress appeared. She said indifferently, "I'm tired. Stay here tonight and serve me, your majesty." Chapter 657. A long and narrow spatial crack tore a hole in the smooth sky. It looked a little terrifying. Zhou Yi, Huanji, Su He, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing stood outside the spatial crack. Their beautiful faces were filled with worry. The experts of the Dao sect floated a little further away, their faces full of shame. If they were strong enough to resist the strange beasts, they would not have let the Dao head of the Dao sect take the risk to enter the strange beast's territory. Li Mu turned his head and swept his gaze across the beautiful faces. In the end he just waved at them, then turned and flew into the spatial crack without hesitation. The thin spirit qi in the 10 continents could not allow his cultivation to progress. Only by going to the peach garden could his cultivation continue to improve. Tianjizi, the ancestors of the demon Dao, and all the experts had sacrificed themselves there. Li Mu naturally wanted to live a stable life with his family. But in the face of a great calamity, if he did not do something, no one would. At this moment he took the risk for the future peace of the 10 continents, for the sake of living a stable life with them forever. The 5 black dragons followed behind Li Mu and also flew into the spatial crack. In the boundless gray space, spirit qi and evil qi existed at the same time. After a slight obstruction, Li Mu once again felt the pores on his body relax. The spirit qi in the peach garden was so abundant that even if Li Mu did not take the initiative to guide it, it would gather in Li Mu's body by itself. This was no longer the place where Li Mu first entered the peach garden. The spatial crack that connected the two spaces had been moving at a fast speed in the past few months. There were also strange beasts of different races appearing from the spatial crack. Ao Feng and the others appeared behind Li Mu. Li Mu glanced at them and asked, "How do you feel?" Bathing in the rich spirit qi, Ao Feng almost moaned in comfort. A look of enjoyment appeared on his old face as he muttered, "Comfortable, it's like coming home." Roar. As soon as Li Mu's aura appeared, he heard a roar. A strange beast with 2 horns on its head roared and charged towards Li Mu. When he was about to reach Li Mu, lightning flashed in his mouth. Then he spat out a lightning ball that was several feet in size and went straight for Li Mu. Li Mu's figure mysteriously disappeared just as the thunderball was about to touch him. In the next moment he appeared on the head of this exotic beast that was comparable to a level 7 beast. Compared to the gigantic beast's body, Li Mu's body seemed so small. Facing this gigantic beast that was countless times larger than him, Li Mu reached out and pressed his hand on its head. The strange beast suddenly froze in place and its body couldn't help but tremble. Not long after, its body turned into a withered beast corpse and fell to the ground. Li Mu lowered his head and looked at his hand. He felt the magic power in his body increase slightly. He had never thought that there would be a day when he would use demonic techniques. The spirit qi in the peach garden was unusually rich. It definitely surpassed that of the 10 continents 10,000 years ago. If one cultivated here, there wouldn't be any bottlenecks that were difficult to break through. As long as one's cultivation reached a certain level, Ascending to the level 9 was a matter of course. However, even if Li Mu cultivated here, he had just ascended to the level 8. If he wanted to ascend again, it would be at least a few decades later. He couldn't wait for a few decades. He had to find a shortcut. The strange beasts fed on the living beings of the 10 continents. From a certain perspective, the living beings of the 10 continents were their prey and also their resources. To Li Mu, the strange beasts were also resources. There was no good or evil in Taoism. Demonic techniques might not be considered evil when used on the enemy. After killing this strange beast, the herd of beasts in the distance started to become restless. Then more strange beasts rushed over. Ao Feng and the others were so frightened that their faces turned pale. Li Mu immediately said, "Transform into dragons now." When Ao Feng and the other dragons heard this, they transformed into their black dragon forms without hesitation. Li Mu concealed his aura and hid under a piece of dragon's scale. When the 5 dragons were shivering, the beast horde had already arrived. However, they didn't attack Ao Feng and the others. They only circled around them once before dispersing. Ao Feng was in disbelief. He asked telepathically, What's going on?" At this moment, Li Mu was already sure that his guess was right. The strange beasts wouldn't attack the dragon tribe like how they attacked humans. Because the dragon tribe was originally their own kind, Li Mu transmitted some images recorded in the dragon tribe's heavenly book into Ao Feng's mind. Ao Feng was stunned for a long time before he asked in shock, We are strange beasts?" Although the dragon tribe was arrogant and had always looked down on the other races of the 10 continents for 10,000 years, they had always acknowledged their identity as living beings of the 10 continents. They hated the strange beasts that had wreaked havoc in the 10 continents. In the past few months, when the strange beasts had invaded, they had put in a lot of effort in exterminating the strange beasts. Now Li Mu told him that they were strange beasts. Ao Feng couldn't accept it and he wasn't willing to accept it. Li Mu didn't give Ao Feng an answer. Instead he asked, "Do you think so?" Ao Feng was flustered and exasperated. He immediately said, "No, these brainless idiots. How can they be compared to the dragon tribe? They aren't even fit to carry the shoes of the noble dragon tribe." Ao Feng was obviously touched by Li Mu's words. The dragon tribe was the noblest and smartest race. Although these strange beasts were powerful, their bestial nature was far greater than their intelligence. They were animals. What was the difference between saying that the dragon tribe was strange beasts and calling them animals? If these strange beasts had attacked them like how they attacked Li Mu, it would have been fine. However, they ignored them. This made Ao Feng feel that the dignity of the dragon tribe had been insulted. However, he didn't dare to provoke these strange beasts. Although most of these beasts were weaker than him, the auras of a few strange beasts in the distance made him tremble with fear. Ao Feng no longer paid attention to those strange beasts. He and the other 4 black dragons maintained their dragon forms and began to cultivate on the ground. The spiritual chi here was too dense. It was simply like heaven. He felt that it wouldn't be long before he became an 8th level black dragon. At that time he would go find those beasts in the distance to vent his anger. While Ao Feng and the others were cultivating, Li Mu released his divine perception. The situation within 100 miles appeared in his mind. Within 100 miles, there were a total of 4 8th level strange beasts and a dozen or so 7th level strange beasts. It seemed that even in the Peach Garden 9th level creatures weren't everywhere. This was good news. These 4 8th level strange beasts were very far away from each other. It seemed that strange beasts also had a sense of territory. Li Mu and Ao Feng were in the territory of an 8th level strange beast with the body of a tiger and the head of a deer. At this moment, that strange beast seemed to have discovered something. It roared and rushed in the direction of Li Mu, Ao Feng and the others. Li Mu's eyes flashed. Then he formed a seal with both hands. His body transformed, and in the end he actually transformed into a 1,000-foot-long azure dragon. His body exuded an 8th level pressure. He had inherited Ao Qing's bloodline and had completely comprehended the dragon clan's heavenly book. Combined with his transformation techniques, the dragon he transformed into was no different from a real dragon. Seeing the intruders not far away, that strange beast with the body of a tiger and the head of a deer came to an abrupt halt. Then it roared a few times at Li Mu, indicating that this was its territory. The azure dragon that Li Mu had transformed into let out an arrogant dragon roar. Clearly it wasn't willing to submit. The strange beast let out another furious roar. Dense lightning bolts appeared around its body. It stepped on the lightning bolts and charged madly in Li Mu's direction. It wanted to kill this intruder and defend its territory. Meanwhile, the azure dragon in the distance spat out a dragon's breath. Within the dragon's breath, there was an imperceptible golden light. Whoosh! The golden light arrived in an instant. A small hole appeared in the center of the strange beast's forehead. Its running body came to an abrupt halt. The lightning surrounding its body also gradually disappeared. It fell to the ground powerlessly. This arrow had used up all of his spiritual energy. Li Mu's body fell directly into the void and stopped in midair. The spiritual chi here was too dense. The speed at which the mantra recovered his spiritual energy had also increased by tens to hundreds of times. In just a short moment he had already recovered half of his spiritual energy. The commotion that happened here quickly attracted the attention of the other three strange beasts in the distance. Li Mu noticed that they were rapidly approaching. He let out a dragon's roar. An extreme pressure spread out and the three auras gradually slowed down. Roar. Deafening roars came from three directions. Then the three powerful auras gradually moved away. This meant that they had acknowledged Li Mu as the king of this area. Li Mu slowly flew down and transformed back into his human form. He placed his hand on the head of the strange beast that had died. The aura of the strange beast that had died was constantly weakening. Beside it, another aura was constantly rising. Seeing that the spatial crack in front of him was moving towards the territory of another strange beast, Li Mu could not stop it. He could only sit down cross-legged and refine the abundant energy in his body. The spatial crack was not very big at this time. Only strange beasts below the 7th level could pass through. Li Mu believed that Xianxia and the others could handle it. It was not until a month later that Li Mu completely refined the last trace of energy that belonged to the 8th level strange beast in his body. He let out a long breath of turbid air, then stood up and flew towards the direction of the spatial crack. Not long after, the roars of strange beasts came from the distant sky. The low-level strange beasts within 100 miles all prostrated themselves on the ground and shivered. Meanwhile, in the land of the 10 continents, strange beasts continued to emerge from the spatial crack in the past month after the Daoist leader had left. Furthermore, the spatial crack continued to expand and required more and more 7th-level cultivators to stabilize it. The powerful cultivators of the True Path sect had to focus all their efforts on stabilizing the spatial crack. Occasionally, some strange beasts would slip through the net and escape. In the process of hunting them down, some outstanding young disciples of the True Path sect had also emerged. They were noticed by the sect and began to cultivate them vigorously. At the same time, some powerful mechanism Dharma treasures began to be sent over by the Great Zhou court. These Dharma treasures were extremely sturdy. They only needed to be activated with spiritual jades to unleash great power. They were of great help in the battle against the strange beasts. The disciples of the corpse sect refined the dead strange beasts into beast corpses. Using the beast corpses against the strange beasts, coupled with the mechanism Dharma treasures, they greatly reduced the casualties of the True Path sect disciples. Although the True Path sect had the upper hand in the battle against the strange beasts with overwhelming power, everyone knew that this was only a temporary victory. More powerful strange beasts would eventually descend. The other side of the spatial crack carried the hope of all living beings in the 10 continents. The paradise. Li Mu did not know how much time had passed, nor did he know what level his cultivation had reached. He had constantly been searching for the constantly moving spatial crack, preventing even more powerful strange beasts from descending into the 10 continents. He had also constantly been fighting against powerful strange beasts. In fact, he had already lost count of how many strange beasts had died at his hands. He had been attacked several times by groups of strange beasts. He had only managed to survive thanks to Ao Feng and the others' protection. He had also been hunted down twice by strange beasts comparable to the 9th level. He had only managed to keep his life thanks to his outstanding ability to escape. After spending so much time alone in the nest of strange beasts, Li Mu had already become numb to these things. Fighting and improving were his entire life. Another corpse of a level 8 strange beast lay at Li Mu's feet. Because he had killed far too many strange beasts, his body was shrouded in a murderous aura. The strange beasts in the surroundings all fled for their lives when they sensed this aura. Li Mu touched the barge's head. The aura of the corpse rapidly weakened until it completely vanished. Li Mu heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to go elsewhere, his hair suddenly stood on end and he looked up at the sky. A vortex had appeared in the gray sky at some point in time. This vortex was like a giant eye that looked down at Li Mu from above. Within the giant eye, a power that made one shudder was continuously gathering. Suddenly, a purple lightning bolt suddenly descended from the giant eye. This lightning bolt was extremely fast. Even the speed of the sun-shooting bow could not compare to it. It seemed to have traversed space in an instant and landed directly on Li Mu's body. A giant pit of 10,000 feet appeared on the ground. The giant pit was charred black and the entire space was deathly silent. Cough. A light cough broke the silence and a naked figure crawled out from the center of the giant pit. Boom. Another bolt of lightning descended from the giant eye in the sky. The figure was struck down again and it took a long time before he slowly got up. Boom boom boom. In the next instant, 3 purple lightning bolts dyed the entire sky purple and once again drowned the figure on the ground. At the same time, 5,000 kilometers away, a few 300 tall cosmos beasts with extremely terrifying auras suddenly looked towards the same direction, and then they swiftly approached. Chapter 658. Rumble. Purple lightning constantly fell from the gray sky. Bolt after bolt landed on Li Mu's body. He was very confused. When the spirit chi of the 10 continents was abundant, the cultivators who ascended to the 9th realm seemed to succeed naturally. There had never been any records of lightning tribulations. Fortunately, after countless battles and refining the power of countless beasts, Li Mu's body and soul had both reached a new peak. Apart from destroying his clothes, this level of lightning could not harm him at all. As a matter of fact, under the stimulation of the lightning, Li Mu's physical strength, which had remained stagnant for a long time, actually increased slightly. Boom. When the last bolt of lightning, which was 10 times thicker than before, fell, Li Mu was bathed in lightning. His body finally reacted, but it only brought him a bit of pain. After the lightning passed, his skin became even fairer and a layer of lightning flickered on his body. Li Mu raised his head again. The eye-like whirlpool in the sky was slowly dissipating. His cultivation had also reached a new level that he had never reached before. Li Mu stood naked in the huge, scorched pit. He lowered his head and looked at his body. He could not help but feel a sliver of doubt. That's it. Here the sky was always gray. Li Mu found it difficult to sense the flow of time. Apart from fighting, he was constantly cultivating. Even his thoughts had become much more sluggish. It was only at this moment that Li Mu realized that he seemed to have entered the dream realm. Not long after, he discovered 3 abnormally powerful auras approaching from different directions. Among the 3 auras, Li Mu was familiar with 2 of them. He had intruded into their territory twice before and was discovered by them. If he had not fled quickly when he saw that the situation was bad, it was very likely that he would have died at the hands of the 2 9th realm beasts. Now their presences could no longer exert absolute pressure on him. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Although the strange beasts did not have much intelligence, they still recognized this human who had once trespassed on their territory. One of the strange beasts with the body of an eagle and the head of a snake opened its mouth and spat out a red stream of light, heading straight for Li Mu. Li Mu reached out with one hand and formed a circular talisman formation in the air, blocking the light. This 9th level exotic beast that had once posed a fatal threat to him was nothing more than that in his eyes now. At the same time, Li Mu stretched out his other hand and formed a seal. His lips moved slightly. He worked so hard and cultivated so urgently, not because he hoped to fight against these strange beasts with his level 9 cultivation, but because after reaching level 9 he would be able to control the true power of the classic of Daoda. Dao can be Dao, but it is not a constant Dao. Names can be named, but they are not constant names. They are the most mysterious of mysteries and they are the door to many wonders. The power of heaven and earth continued to surge into Li Mu's body, but it wasn't as unbearable as before. After Li Mu recited the last mantra in his heart, heaven and earth seemed to stand still for a moment. An enormous amount of power of heaven and earth surged into Li Mu's body. This power of heaven and earth was enough to destroy the body and soul of a Dao integration stage cultivator. However, the current Li Mu had already stepped into a new realm after experiencing the lightning tribulation. Finally, there was no more power of heaven and earth surging in from the outside, and the power of heaven and earth in Li Mu's body also quieted down. At this moment the world before Li Mu's eyes changed greatly. Many thin lines suddenly appeared in the empty space before him. Everything around him became still, including the scarlet light that the exotic beast attacked Li Mu with and the energy balls that had already formed in the mouths of the other two exotic beasts. Li Mu didn't know what these thin lines were, but the scarlet light, the energy balls formed by the two exotic beasts, and the talisman formation in his hand were all entwined with thin lines. And he seemed to be able to control these thin lines. With a single thought from Li Mu, the thin lines entwined around the light and the energy balls quickly retreated. As the thin lines disappeared, the powerful scarlet light disappeared directly. The energy balls in the mouths of the other two exotic beasts also dissipated slowly before they could form. The three exotic beasts were still in the same place, but their attacks had mysteriously disappeared. They were stunned for a moment before they launched another attack on the human. However, this time they could only roar silently at Li Mu. They didn't use any powerful divine abilities. This scene looked a little comical. In Li Mu's eyes, there wasn't a single thin line around the three exotic beasts. All the thin lines in this place were gathered around him. He looked at the three exotic beasts as if their lives were in his hands. Dao. Li Mu seemed to have understood something as he softly uttered a word. At this moment he finally understood the true function of the Dao De Ching. These thin lines were the purest and most fundamental power in heaven and earth. It could also be said that they were the Dao itself. At this moment he was in control of the heavenly Dao in this area. Li Mu spread out his divine thoughts. Everything within a radius of 10,000 miles was under his control. At some point the three exotic beasts stopped roaring. Instead they humbly lowered their heads in front of Li Mu. Not only them, when Li Mu's divine thoughts swept across the area where the thin lines appeared, countless exotic beasts stood quietly in place and lowered their heads after a short moment of shock. What Li Mu didn't know was that after he recited the complete mantra of the Tao Te Ching tens of thousands of miles away, a magnificent floating city suddenly began to shake violently. Countless figures flew out of the city. Their faces were full of shock as they spoke one after another. What's going on? The Immortal Palace can actually have an earthquake? Where are the Immortal Guards? Quickly go and find out the reason. While everyone was panicking in the deepest part of the palace, a graceful and elegant woman asked the man with the crown beside her, "Your Majesty, what happened? Why did the Immortal Palace shake for no reason?" The man with the crown looked solemn. He closed his eyes and pinched his fingers. After a while he slowly opened his eyes and shook his head. "I can't divine it, but I have a bad feeling in my heart." The cultivation of the man with the crown was already at the peak of the world. Any premonition he had would not be baseless. The woman asked worriedly, "Is something big going to happen in the Milky Way immortal realm?" Beside the woman was a young girl holding her arm. She wasn't worried at all as she giggled and said, "Mother, don't worry. Father's cultivation is so high. No matter what happens, he will be able to handle it." The woman patted her head and said, "Mother, how many times have I said that the path of cultivation is endless? Although your father's cultivation is high, he is not invincible in the endless immortal realm. You must not be arrogant. Otherwise, you will get into big trouble in the future." As soon as she finished speaking, the man with the crown snorted and said, "I may not be invincible in the endless immortal realms, but in the Milky Way immortal realms, no one has been my opponent for many years. 8,000 years or 10,000 years. The young girl was clever. She gave the woman a look and ran over to hold the man with the crown. She said, "In my heart, Father is the most powerful. In the endless immortal realm, he is invincible." In the land of the strange beasts, when Li Mu tried to extend his divine sense into the distance again, he found that the range he could control was only 10,000 miles. He could not reach any further. In this 10,000-mile radius, the sky was the same gray. All the areas were occupied by strange beasts. Li Mu wanted to explore further, but he suddenly felt dizzy. Then, the thin line in front of him disappeared, and the surrounding world returned to its original state. His magic power was almost exhausted. Li Mu immediately became alert. However, when he saw the 3 ninth-level strange beasts still standing humbly in the same place, he realized that they had been tamed by him. The moment he entered the 9th level, the strange beasts in the peach garden were no longer a disaster for the 10 continents. Li Mu let out a long breath. There was a trace of longing in his eyes. The spatial crack from the 10 continents to the peach garden was easy to enter but difficult to exit. Only strange beasts below the 7th level could pass through. After coming here, Li Mu had not returned even once. Now he could finally go home. The spatial crack had deviated by hundreds of miles. Li Mu reached the edge of the crack in an instant. He needed to expand the crack several times before he could enter the 10 continents with his 9th level cultivation. Li Mu waved his hand and a ray of light shot into the spatial crack. The crack began to expand rapidly. After a few breaths, it was hundreds of feet wide. Li Mu could not wait. His figure turned into a ray of light and disappeared into the crack. At the same time, in the Milky Way Immortal Palace, the man with the crown who was meditating cross-legged suddenly opened his eyes. There was a puzzled look on his face. He muttered, "What's going on?" That feeling disappeared again. Chapter 659. In the Zhou continent. It had been 10 years since the Dao ancestor entered the peach garden. In these 10 years, the 7th realm cultivators of the Dao sect had been constantly protecting the moving space crack in the sky. However, they were still unable to stop the space crack from expanding. In the beginning, only 5th realm mutated beasts would appear from the space crack. Now 7th realm mutated beasts would appear from time to time. The current situation was still under the control of the Dao sect. However, if one day 8th realm mutated beasts could pass through, the end of the 10 continents would come. On this day, 40 Dao sect cultivators sat cross-legged around the space crack as usual. They continuously injected dermic powers into the space crack to stabilize it. Among these 40 people there were the grand elders of the Dao sect, the Buddhist Bantis, the demon king of the demon country, the ghost king of the ghost domain, and the dragon tribe elders. The space crack was already extremely unstable. All the cultivators closed their eyes and focused, trying their best to stabilize the space crack. Suddenly their expressions changed and they opened their eyes at the same time. The originally calm space crack suddenly began to expand. Everyone hurriedly used more dermic powers to stabilize it, but it was to no avail. In the blink of an eye, the space crack had expanded to a radius of several hundred feet. In an instant, an extreme fear enveloped everyone's hearts. In the next moment, a figure in green flew out from the space crack. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Then the fear on their faces turned into ecstasy. They blurted out, "Daoist leader." However, the joy on their faces quickly turned into fear again. A huge beast head peeked out from the space crack. Following that was an extreme pressure. It was a pressure that far exceeded that of the ancestors of the demonic Dao and Emperor Bai. This was a 9th realm mutated beast. Seeing the Dao sect elders changing expressions, Li Mu turned to look at the mutated beast that was trying to come out of the space crack. He said plainly, "Go back." His voice was not loud, but to the mutated beast it was like thunder. Its huge body trembled and then it obediently retracted its head. When the Dao sect elders saw this, they were dumbfounded. Li Mu looked at everyone with a smile and said slowly, "The tribulation of the mutated beast has been resolved. You don't have to worry anymore." While the crowd was still in a daze, slowly accepting the news, Li Mu closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, there were already countless thin lines in front of him. He controlled the thin lines to cover the crack in space. After a few breaths of time, the gigantic crack in space slowly disappeared. The space in this area became incomparably stable. At the same time, with this place as the center, the area within 10,000 miles of the 10 continents was covered by his divine sense. He saw Fairy's capital. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were sitting at the stone table in the courtyard, staring blankly at the sky. Wanwan and Xiao Bai were standing behind them with no smiles on their faces. In the imperial palace, Zhou Yi reclined on the dragon throne. His eyes were unfocused and the book in his hand was upside down, but he was completely unaware of it. Mr. Mei and Shangguanli were standing behind him with blank expressions. He leaned against a pillar in the hall happily, gnawing on the drumstick in his hand. He also saw the demon nation, the ghost realm, the East Sea fantasy princess, Hu Jiao and Heart to Heart. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded in everyone's hearts. "I'm back, Great Zhou Fairy's capital." Today was not a festival, but the people of Fairy's capital were decorated with lanterns and colored banners because it was Her Majesty's big day. Her Majesty the Empress of Great Zhou was going to marry the Dao sect's Dao head. The people of Great Zhou had been looking forward to this marriage for a long time. For some people, they had been looking forward to this marriage since they were young. Now that their children were running around everywhere, this marriage finally happened. The Dao sect was the only super sect in the 10 continents. This news naturally spread throughout the 10 continents at an extremely fast speed. The disaster of the mutated beast had been resolved, and the Dao head was getting married. It could be said that it was a double blessing. The entire 10 continents were immersed in celebration. A month later, somewhere in the North Sea, there was a ripple in the void and 2 figures appeared. Zhou Yi held Li Mu's hand and asked curiously, "Why did you bring me here?" Li Mu smiled and said, "You'll know in a while." He floated in the void and looked down. His gaze passed through the sea and the mud at the bottom of the sea, and landed on a simple page lying there quietly. After reaching the 9th realm and using the Tao Te Ching, his divine will could sweep across the 10 continents and 4 seas for a short period of time. The whereabouts of the last page of the heavenly book was no longer a secret to him. This page of the heavenly book was not in anyone's possession. It had been lost a long time ago. After countless changes, it lay quietly at the bottom of the remote North Sea. It was no wonder that Li Mu could not find it when he searched the 10 continents. He waved his hand and the page of the heavenly book shone faintly. It flew up and landed in Li Mu's hand. Now he had all 24 pages of the heavenly book. Li Mu stretched out his hand, and the 24 pages of the heavenly book floated in his palm. The pages were gradually wrapped in golden light, and a real book appeared in his hand. At the same time, in front of Li Mu and Zhou Yi, a golden door gradually solidified. Li Mu looked at the Empress beside him and said, "Wait for me here for a while. I'll be back soon." Zhou Yi nodded and said, "Be careful." Li Mu was silent for a moment. He took a step forward and his figure gradually disappeared behind the door. To him, the heavenly book was no longer a secret. When he passed through the door, a white light flashed in front of Li Mu's eyes, and he was temporarily blinded. Then he once again felt the extremely rich spiritual qi. The feeling this place gave him was very similar to the peach garden. Moreover, the spiritual qi here was extremely pure. It did not have the fiendish aura of the peach garden. There was even a kind of fragrance that assailed his nostrils. In the next moment, Li Mu's vision recovered and a scene appeared in front of him. The waterfall by the peach blossom forest was filled with pink petals. In the pool, a woman with a graceful figure was facing Li Mu. She was about to unbutton her clothes. Li Mu was stunned for a moment. Then he immediately said, "Miss, wait, don't take off." "Ah." After a moment of silence, a scream suddenly sounded in Li Mu's ears. The woman's actions of undressing stopped. Then she flew out of the forest. In the next moment, another powerful aura suddenly came from outside. Li Mu heard a man's shocked and angry voice. "Pervert, die." Li Mu noticed that the woman's cultivation seemed to be at the 8th level. However, the man who appeared later was actually at the 9th level. His face was filled with rage. He held a long spear in his hand and stabbed it toward Li Mu without hesitation. The sky splitter spear appeared in Li Mu's hand. He blocked the attack as he said, "It's a misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding." The man's anger did not diminish. He said coldly, "How dare you, pervert, barge into the forbidden area of the Gong family and still dare to quibble? Die." He did not listen to Li Mu's explanation at all. The 2 spears collided with a crisp sound. Then something unexpected happened. Li Mu's sky splitter spear, which had always been successful, actually broke inch by inch after colliding with the man's long spear. He instantly understood that the 2 Dharma treasures were not on the same level at all. At this moment, the man's long spear was wrapped in a divine ability and stabbed toward him again. Li Mu had no intention of fighting with him. He only defended and did not attack. He wanted to use this opportunity to explain, but another aura came from behind him. The woman just now had returned. What was different was that she was riding a miniature version of a barge. Although this barge was small, its aura was at the 8th level. The horn on its head shone brightly. It was clearly condensing a divine ability. Li Mu's eyes were calm as he glanced at the barge. When he was in the peach garden, he had killed countless strange beasts. There was no lack of 8th level barges among them. At this moment, his murderous aura swept out. When the barge sensed this aura, its body trembled and it let out a miserable cry. The light on the horn on its head disappeared. Then it immediately turned around and fled with the woman as if its life depended on it. This scene caused the ninth-level man's expression to change slightly. However, he still tightened his grip on the spear in his hand. He was about to attack again when the sun-shooting bow appeared in Li Mu's hand. The sky-splitter spear had been destroyed, so the sun-shooting bow was the most powerful Dharma treasure he had. When the man saw the sun-shooting bow in Li Mu's hand, he was stunned. Then he said in shock, "The sun-shooting bow? You are from the Xian palace." Li Mu didn't know anything about the Xian palace. He looked at the middle-aged man and explained, "I didn't mean to intrude here. This is all a misunderstanding. I hope you can calm down." The man was clearly afraid of the sun-shooting bow in Li Mu's hand. He didn't attack Li Mu again. Instead, he began to size him up. After sizing him up, he discovered that the person in front of him was handsome and confident. He had an extraordinary bearing, and there was a faint sense of righteousness about him. He didn't seem like a lecherous person. He put away the spear in his hand and asked Li Mu in a relaxed tone, "How did you get here?" Li Mu put away the sun-shooting bow as well. Then he said, "It's a long story. Can you first tell me where this place is?" The middle-aged man was silent for a moment. Then he said, "The Gong family." Seeing Li Mu's confused expression, he thought for a moment and said, "The Gong family of the heavenly cloud city of the northern domain. Are you from the Xian palace?" Li Mu shook his head and said straightforwardly, "I'm from a very distant place. I don't know much about this place. Can you tell me more about it?" "What northern domain? Heavenly Cloud City?" He hadn't even heard of it. He was even mentally prepared for the possibility that behind the door, there was still a strange beast lair. He didn't expect that behind the door there was a bare-breasted woman. The huge psychological contrast caught Li Mu off guard. Fortunately, he was able to communicate with the person in front of him without any language barriers. The man thought for a moment and said, "This is the Milky Way Immortal Domain. The heavenly cloud city of the northern domain is also the territory of the Gong family. Are you from another immortal domain?" Li Mu was silent for a moment again. Then he asked, "What? Immortal domain?" Gong Yun looked at the handsome young man in front of him and wondered if he had met a fool. Originally, he didn't want to bother with him anymore. However, this fool was very strong and had the sun-shooting bow in his hand. The Xian palace didn't have any other skills, but the art of making bows was famous throughout the Milky Way immortal realm. If he angered this fool, just one arrow would be enough to destroy his hundreds of years of cultivation. These thoughts flashed through Gong Yun's mind. He took out a jade slip and placed it on his forehead. After a few breaths, he tossed it to Li Mu and said, "This is the information I know. You can take a look." Li Mu reached out and took the jade slip. He nodded to the man in thanks and sent a strand of his consciousness into the jade slip. Then his expression became sluggish. The Milky Way Immortal Domain, the Immortal Palace, the Eastern, Southern, Western Domains, the Beast Region. There were countless immortal domains in this world. The Milky Way Immortal Domain was only one of them. The Milky Way Immortal Domain was ruled by the Milky Way Immortal Palace. The 4 domains under the Immortal Palace were extremely vast. The cities were connected by teleportation arrays. Otherwise, even 9th-level cultivators would have to fly for several years or even longer to get from one city to another. Li Mu, who had just left the 10 continents, discovered that his imagination of distance wasn't enough. Li Mu's attention was quickly drawn to the information in the Beast region. The information in the jade slip about the strange beasts in the Beast region was similar to what Li Mu knew. So, the place where he fought and cultivated for 10 years was actually the Beast region. However, Li Mu, who had never left the Beast region, didn't know that there was such a vast world outside the Beast region. The cultivators of the Milky Way Immortal Domain would often subdue the strange beasts of the Beast region and use them as mounts or spirit pets. These strange beasts were savage by nature and would only submit to absolute strength. The Gong family was a famous beast tamer family in the Northern Domain. Only now did Li Mu realize that the peach blossom wasn't a hoax. It was just that the path to heaven led to the Beast region. That was a place that even the cultivators of the Milky Way Immortal Domain didn't dare to go too deep. In addition, Li Mu also saw some information related to cultivation in the jade slip. Even in the Milky Way Immortal Domain, those who reached the 9th realm could be considered powerful and had a lifespan of 500 years. After reaching the 9th realm, they would have to face a lightning tribulation every 100 years. Each lightning tribulation would be stronger than the last. If they could safely pass through it, their lifespan would increase by another 100 years. If they couldn't pass through it, they would die. In theory, if they could safely pass through each lightning tribulation, they would be able to live forever. Countless bits of information poured into Li Mu's mind, causing him to stand there in a daze for a long time. Gong Yun didn't know what Li Mu was thinking, but he knew that this person was indeed very strong. If he could rope him in, Heavenly Cloud City's strength would increase by quite a bit. He thought for a moment, then suddenly said, "Fellow Daoist, if you have nowhere else to go, you can stay in Heavenly Cloud City. I just destroyed your magic treasure, so I'll compensate you with another one. In addition, I'll give you a mansion." Li Mu thought for a moment, then said, "I have a lot of family, I'm afraid it's not good to disturb them." Gong Yun smiled and said, "It's okay. The Gong family has several villas outside the city, covering thousands of hectares. No matter how many family members you have, you can live there." Li Mu was silent for a moment, then said, "I still have some friends." Gong Yun didn't care at all and said generously, "Just invite them all. The Gong family can give you another 10,000 kilometers of land. Is that enough?" Li Mu cupped his fists and said, "It's enough. Thank you, Brother Gong. Milky Way Immortal Palace." The man with the crown suddenly opened his eyes. He flicked his finger lightly and the word Gong appeared in the air. The chaos of the immortal domain began with the surname Gong. His face was solemn and he said in a deep voice, "Pass down my decree. From now on, pay close attention to all experts with the surname Gong in the 4 regions, Heavenly Cloud City." After sending Li Mu off, Gong Yun shuddered inexplicably. He stood there in a daze for a moment, then a look of joy appeared on his face again. He muttered, "How many experts will he bring? The Gong clan has made a huge profit this time." North Sea. Zhou Yi waited for a while and another door appeared beside her. Li Mu's figure walked out. Zhou Yi asked curiously, "How is it? What's behind that door?" Li Mu took her hand and smiled mysteriously at her. "It's a good place. Go back and prepare. We're moving." 3 months later. Great Zhou's divine capital. Li Mu was surrounded by beauties, and further away were the 7th realm experts of the Dao sect. At this moment, everyone's faces were full of anticipation. Li Mu took out the heavenly book and a golden door appeared in the sky. He looked back and stepped through the door. Milky Way Immortal Palace. The man with the crown, who was in seclusion, suddenly opened his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, that feeling is coming again." The end of the book.